梁歌制作，一片阳光，作者林徽因。到志摩。11月19日，我们的好朋友，许多人都爱戴的新诗人徐志摩突兀的、不可信的、残酷的，在飞机上遇险而死去。
Production by Liang Gu, author of A Piece of Sunshine, Lin Hui-Yin. In Mourning for Jima. On November 19th, our good friend Su Jima, a new poet beloved by many people, was unexpected, unbelievable, and cruel, and died in danger on a plane.
这消息在20日的早上像一根针刺触到许多朋友的心上，顿时那一早的天幕一般的昏黑，哀痛的咽梗锁住每一个人的嗓子。志摩死，谁曾将这两个句子连在一处想过？他是那样活泼的一个人。
This news touched the hearts of many friends like a needle on the morning of the 20th, making This news touched the hearts of many friends like a needle on the morning of the 20th, making the sky that morning as dark as ink, and the throats of morning choked everyone's throat. Jima, death, who has ever thought of combining these two sentences together? He is such a lively person.
那样刚刚站在壮年的顶峰上的一个人，朋友们常常惊讶他的活动，他那像小孩般的精神和认真，谁又会想到他死？谁也没有主意，谁也没有话说。世事不容我们安插任何的希望。
Such a person who has just stood at the peak of his prime. Friends are often surprised by his activities, his childlike spirit and seriousness. Who would have thought of his death? No one has an idea, no one has any. Such a person who has just stood at the peak of his prime. Friends are often surprised by his activities, his childlike spirit and seriousness. Who would have thought of his death? No one has an idea, no one has anything to say.
情感不容我们不伤到这突兀的不幸，理智又不容我们有超自然的幻想。默然相对，默然为作，而志摩则仍是死去没有回头，没有音讯，永远的不会回头，永远的不会再有音讯。话虽是这样说。
Emotions do not allow us not to mourn this sudden misfortune, and reason does not allow us to have supernatural fantasies. Facing each other in silence, sitting around in silence. But Jima still died without looking back. There is no news, he will never look back, and there will never be news again. Having said that,
他却是已经死了整2周了。诗人的志摩用不着我来多说，他那许多诗文便是估价他的天平。我们新诗的历史才是这样的短，恐怕他的判断人尚在我们儿孙辈的中间。
But he has been dead for 2 weeks. I don't need to say more about the poet Jima. His many poems are the scale by which he can be evaluated. The history of our new poetry is so short, and I'm afraid the people who can judge it are still among our children and grandchildren.
我要谈的是诗人之外的志摩。至于他的作品全是抒情的吗？他的兴趣只限于情感吗？更是不对。志摩的兴趣是极广泛的，就有几件，说起来不认得他的人便要奇怪。突然的。
What I want to talk about is Jima besides being a poet. As for whether all his works are lyrical, are his interests limited to emotions? It's even more wrong. Jima's interests are extremely broad. There are just a few things that would make people who don't recognize him feel strange. Suddenly.
他闯出我们这共同的世界，沉入永远的境界，不给我们一点预告，一点准备，或是一个最后希望的余地。这种几乎近于忍心的决绝，那一天不知震麻了多少朋友的心。现在那不能否认的事实。
He breaks out of our common world and sinks into eternal silence, without giving us any warning, any preparation, or a last hope. This kind of determination, which was almost unbearable, shocked the hearts of many friends that day. Now that is an undeniable fact.
仍然无情地挡住我们前面，任凭我们多苦楚地哀悼他的惨死，多迫切的希冀能够仍然接触到他原来的音容，事实是不会为我们这伤道而有些虚活动的可能。
Still blocking our front relentlessly. No matter how painfully we mourn his tragic death, and how desperately we hope to still be able to get in touch with his original voice and appearance, the fact is that there is no possibility that we have to move because of our mourning.
这难堪的永远静寂和消沉，便是死的最残酷处。现在这事实一天比一天更结实、更固定、更不容否认。志摩是死了，这个简单残酷的实际早又添上时间的色彩，1周、2周，一直的增长下去。袁宁说
This embarrassing eternal silence and depression is the cruelest part of death. Now this fact is becoming more solid, more fixed, and more undeniable day by day. Jima is dead. This simple and cruel reality has already. This embarrassing eternal silence and depression is the cruelest part of death. Now this fact is becoming more solid, more fixed, and more undeniable day by day. Jima is dead. This simple and cruel reality has already been added with the color of time.
有一天，他在校舍里读书，外边下起了倾盆大雨，为是英伦那样的岛国才有的狂雨。忽然他听到有人猛敲他的房门，外边跳进一个被雨水淋得全湿的客人。不用说，他便是志摩。
One day when he was studying in the school building, it was pouring rain outside, a violent rain that could only be seen in island countries like England. Suddenly he heard someone knocking on his door, and jumped into a man who was completely drenched by the rain. Wet guests. Needless to say, he is Shima.
一进门，一把扯着袁宁向外跑，说：“快来，我们到桥上去等着。”这一来，把袁宁怔住了。他问智魔等什么，在这大雨里。智魔睁大了眼睛，孩子似的高兴地说：“看雨后的红去。”袁宁不只说他不去。
As soon as he entered the door, he grabbed Yuan Ning and ran out, telling him to come quickly and we would wait on the bridge. Yuan Ning was stunned by this, and he asked Jima what he was waiting for in the heavy rain. Jima opened his eyes wide and said happily like a child, "Look at the rainbow after the rain." Yuan Ning not only said that he would not go. As soon as he entered the door, he grabbed Yuan Ning and ran out, telling him to come quickly and we would wait on the bridge. Yuan Ning was stunned by this, and he asked Jima what he was waiting for in the heavy rain. Jima opened his eyes wide and said happily like a child, "Look at the rainbow after the rain." Yuan Ning not only said that he would not go.
并且劝智魔趁早将湿透的衣服换下，再穿上雨衣出去。英国的湿气起势而细，智魔不等他说完，一溜烟的自己跑了。此外，他的兴趣对于戏剧绘画都极深浓，戏剧不用说，与诗文是那么接近。
He also advised Jima to change out of his soaked clothes as soon as possible and put on a raincoat to go out. The humidity in Britain was child's play. Jima ran away without waiting for him to finish. In addition, he is very interested in drama and painting. Needless to say, drama is so close to poetry. He also advised Jima to change out of his soaked clothes as soon as possible and put on a raincoat to go out. The humidity in Britain was child's play. Jima ran away without waiting for him to finish. In addition, he is very interested in drama and painting. Needless to say, drama is so close to poetry.
他领略绘画的天才也颇为可观，后期印象派的几个画家，他都有极精密的爱恶。对于文艺复兴时代那几位，他也很熟悉。他最爱鲍蒂切利和达文谦。
His talent for appreciating painting is also considerable. His talent for appreciating painting is also considerable. He has very precise likes and dislikes for several post-impressionist painters. He is also very familiar with those from the Renaissance. He loves Botticelli and Leonardo da Vinci the most.
自然，他也常承认文人喜画常是间接的受了别人论文的影响，他的就受了法兰 Roger Fry 和斐德 Walter Pater 的不少。朋友们，我们失掉的不只是一个朋友，一个诗人。
Naturally, he often admitted that the literates' appreciation of painting was often indirectly influenced by other people's papers. His was influenced a lot by Roger Fry and Walter Pater. Friends, we have lost more than a friend and a poet.
我们丢掉的是个极难的可爱的人格。晚上我有约会出去了，回来时很晚，听差说他又来过。是与我们夫妇刚走，他自己坐了一会儿，喝了一壶茶，在桌上写了些字便走了。我到桌上一看，我说神秘。
What we have lost is a personality that is both urgent and lovable. What we have lost is a personality that is both urgent and lovable. I went out on a date in the evening, and when I came back very late, the waiter said that he had been here again.
其实竟许是傻，是痴。事实上，他只是比我们认真、虔诚到傻气，到痴。他愉快起来，他的快乐的翅膀可以碰得到天；他忧伤起来，他的悲戚是深得没有底。寻常评价的衡量在他手里失了效用。
In fact, he may be stupid or crazy. In fact, he is just more serious than us, pious to the point of stupidity and madness. When he is happy, his happy wings can touch the sky. When he is sad, his sorrow is bottomless. The measurement of ordinary evaluation has lost its effectiveness in his hands.
厉害轻重他自有他的看法，纯是艺术的情感的脱离寻常的原则。所以往常人常听到朋友们说到他总爱带着嗟叹的口吻说：“那是智魔，你又有什么法子？”我认得他，今年整10年。
He has his own views on the pros and cons, which are purely out of ordinary principles of artistic emotion. Therefore, people often hear friends talking about him and always say with a sigh, "That's Jima, what can you do?" I have known him for 10 years.
那时候他在伦敦经济学院，尚未去康桥。我初次遇到他，也就是他初次认识到影响他迁学的狄更生先生。不用说，他和我父亲最谈得来，虽然他们年岁上差别不算少，一见面之后便互相引为知己。
At that time, he was at the London School of Economics and had not yet gone to Cambridge. The first time I met him was the first time he got to know Mr. Dickinson, who influenced him to move to school. Needless to say, he and my father had the best rapport. Although they were quite different in age, they became close friends as soon as they met.
他到康桥之后，由狄更生介绍进了皇家学院。当时和他同学的有我子丈温君元宁。一直到最近2个月，钟元宁还常在说他当时的许多笑话。虽然说是笑话，那也是他对智魔最早的一个惊异的印象。
After he arrived in Cambridge, he was introduced to the Royal Academy by Dickinson. His classmates at that time were my sister-in-law Wen Genuaning. Until the past 2 months, Yuaning often told many of his jokes at that time. Although they were jokes, it was also his earliest surprising impression of Jima.
我们生在这没有宗教的时代，对这死实在太没有把握了。这以后许多思念你的日子，怕要全是昏暗的苦楚，不会有一点点光明，除非我也有你那美丽的诗意的信仰。
We live in this age without religion, and we are so unsure of death. From now on, I will spend many days thinking about you, and I am afraid that they will be all dark pain, without any light, unless I also have your beautiful and poetic faith.
我们中间没有绝对信命运之说的，但是对着这不测的人生，谁不感到惊异？对着那许多事实的痕迹，又如何不感到人力的脆弱、智慧的有限？世事尽有定数，世事尽是偶然。
There is no one among us who absolutely believes in the theory of fate, but who is not surprised by this unexpected life, and how can we not feel the fragility of human power and the limitation of wisdom at the traces of many facts? Is everything settled in this world? Are all things accidental?
对这永远的疑问，我们什么时候能有完全的把握？我们不迷信的，没有宗教的，望着这死的帷幕，更是丝毫没有把握。张开口，我们不会呼吁；闭上眼，不会入梦，徘徊在理智和情感的边沿。
When will we have complete certainty about this eternal question? When will we have complete certainty about this eternal question? We are not superstitious and look at the curtain of death without religion, and we are not sure at all. We want appeal when we open our mouths, we want fall into dreams when we close our eyes, and we linger on the edge of reason and emotion.
我们不能预期后悔，对这死，我们只是永远发怔，吞咽枯涩的泪，待时间来剥削着哀痛的尖锐，加解我们每次背到的创伤。那一天下午初，得到消息的许多朋友，不是全跑到胡适之先生家里吗？
We cannot predict what will happen in the future. We are just always stunned by this death, swallowing dry tears, waiting for time to exploit the sharpness of mourning and scab the wounds of each time we mourn. Didn't many of the friends who got the news at the beginning of that afternoon run to Mr. Hushizhi's house?
但是除去室内相对，默然围坐外，谁也没有主意，谁也不知有什么话说。对这死，我个人的悲绪不禁又来扰乱我对他生前许多清晰的回忆，朋友的原谅。我不说了解。
But apart from wiping away tears and sitting around in silence, no one had an idea, no one knew what to say, damn it. My personal sadness inevitably disturbed many of my clear memories of his life and the forgiveness of my friends. I don't say I understand.
因为不是许多人爱说志摩最不解人情吗？我说他的特点也就在这上头。我们寻常人就爱说了解，能了解的我们便同情，不了解的我们便很落寞，乃至于酷刻，表同情于我们能了解的。
Because don't many people like to say that Jima is the least understanding of human nature? I said this is his characteristic. Because don't many people like to say that Jima is the least understanding of human nature? I said this is his characteristic. We ordinary people like to say that we understand. We sympathize with those who understand. We feel lonely and even embarrassment if we do not understand. Sympathy for what we can understand.
我们以为很适当，不表同情于我们不能了解的，我们也认为很公平。我不该在这里语无伦次的尽管呻吟我们做朋友的悲哀情绪。归根说，读者抱着我们文字看，也就是像志摩的情百雷一样。
We think it's appropriate. We don't sympathize with what we can't understand, and we think it's fair. I shouldn't be moaning incoherently about the sadness of our being friends. In the final analysis, readers read with our words, just like Zimo's Qing by Lei.
要从我们口里再听到关于志摩的一些事，这个我明白，只怕我不能使你们满意，因为关于他的事，动听的使青年人知道这里有个不可多得的人格存在的，实在太多，绝不是几千字可以表达的完。
We want to hear something more about Shima from our mouths. I understand this, but I'm afraid I won't be able to satisfy you, because there are too many things about him that are touching make young people know that there is a rare personality here, and cannot be expressed in a few thousand words.
谁也得承认，像他这样的一个人世间便不轻易有几个的，无论在中国或是外国。我不是为志摩在这里夸张，因为事实上只有为了这桩事，今夏志摩自己便笑得不亦乐乎。志摩，我的朋友。
Everyone has to admit that there are not many people like him in the world, whether in China or abroad. Everyone has to admit that there are not many people like him in the world, whether in China or abroad. I'm not exaggerating for Shimo here, because in fact, just because of this incident, Shimo himself laughed a lot this summer. Shima, my friend.
死本来也不过是一个新的旅程，我们没有到过的，不免过分的怀疑，死不定就比这生苦。我们不能轻易断定那一边没有阳光与人情的温味，但是我前边说过，最难堪的是这永远的境界。
Death is just a new journey. We have never been there before, so we can't help but doubt too much. Death may be more difficult than this life. We cannot easily conclude that there is no sunshine and the comfort of human kindness on the other side. But as I said before, the most embarrassing thing is the eternal silence.
志摩认真的事情绝不含有任何矫伪，他那种痴，那种孩子似的天真实能令人惊讶。志摩的最动人的特点是他那不可信的纯净的天真，对他的理想的愚诚，对艺术欣赏的认真，体会情感的切实。
Jima's serious poetry never contains any pretense. His infatuation and childlike innocence are really surprising. Jima's most touching characteristics are his unbelievable purity of innocence, his sincerity for his ideals, his seriousness in appreciating art, and his practical experience of emotions.
诠释难能可贵到极点。志摩则不然，了解与不了解，他并没有过分的夸张，他只知道温存、和平、体贴。只要他知道有情感的存在，无论出自何人，在何等情况下，他理智上认为适当与否。
They are all extremely valuable. Jima is different. Whether he understands or does not understand, he does not exaggerate too much. He only knows gentleness, peace, and consideration. As long as he knows that there are emotions, no matter who it is from, under what circumstances, he thinks it is appropriate or not intellectually.
他全能表几分同情，他真能体会原谅他人与他自己不相同处，从不会刻薄地单指出严格的破色的道德的天平指摘凡是与他不同的人。对于建筑审美，他常常对思成和我道歉说：“太对不起。”
He is capable of showing some sympathy, and he can truly appreciate the difference between forgiving others and himself. He will never harshly judge anyone who is different from him on the scale of strict and obsolete morality. He is capable of showing some sympathy, and he can truly appreciate the difference between forgiving others and himself. He will never harshly judge anyone who is different from him on the scale of strict and obsolete morality. Regarding architectural aesthetics, he often apologized to Sicheng and me and said, "I'm so sorry."
我的建筑常识全是 Ruskins 那一套。他知道我们是讨厌 Ruskins 的，但是为看一个古建的残址、一块石刻，他比任何人都热心，都更能静心领略。
My architectural knowledge is all that of Ruskins. He knows that we hate Ruskins. But to see the ruins of an ancient building and a stone carving, he is more enthusiastic than anyone else and can appreciate it more calmly.
在我们前边展开的只是一堆坚制的事实。以后我好奇地曾问过志摩这故事的真确，他笑着点头承认这全段故事的真实。我问：那么下文呢？你立在桥上等了多久，并且看到红了没有？
What unfolds before us is only a pile of solid facts. Later, I curiously asked Jima whether this story was true, and he smiled and nodded, admitting that the whole story was true. I asked, what about the next part? How long did you wait on the bridge and did you see a rainbow?
他说记不清，但是他居然看到了红。我诧异地打断他对那红的描写，问他怎么他便知道准会有红的。他得意地笑答我说，完全失意的信仰。他这样的温和，这样的优容，真能使许多人惭愧。
He said he couldn't remember clearly, but he actually saw a rainbow. I interrupted his description of the rainbow in surprise and asked him, how did he know that there would be a rainbow? He answered me with a proud smile, completely poetic belief. His gentleness and grace can really make many people feel ashamed.
我可以忠实地说，至少他要比我们多数的人伟大许多。他觉得人类各种的情感动作全有他不同的价值，放大了的人类的眼光，同情是不该只限于我们划定的范围内。他站在雨中等红。
I can honestly say that at least he is much greater than most of us. He feels that all kinds of human emotional actions have their own differences. I can honestly say that at least he is much greater than most of us. He feels that all kinds of human emotional actions have their own differences, and their value is magnified from the perspective of human beings. Sympathy should not be limited to the scope we demarcate. Inside, he stood in the rain waiting for the rainbow.
他甘冒社会的大步，伪争他的恋爱自由。他坐曲折的火车到乡间去拜哈代，他抛弃博士一类的引诱，卷了书包到英国，只为要拜罗素做老师。他为了一种特异的境遇，一时特异的感动。
He was willing to risk social disapproval to fight for his freedom of love. He took a tortuous train to the countryside to worship Hadai. He abandoned the temptation of a doctorate and packed up his school bag to go to England, just to worship Russell as a teacher. A special situation, a special moment of emotion.
从此在生命途中冒险，从此抛弃所有的就业，只是尝试写几行新诗。这几年新诗尝试的运命并不太令人踊跃，冷嘲热骂只是家常便饭。他常能走几里路去采几茎花。
From then on, he took risks in life, abandoned all his old careers, and just tried to write a few lines of new poems. The fate of trying new poems in the past few years was not very encouraging, and cynicism was commonplace. He could often walk a few miles. Go pick some flowers.
费许多周折去看一个朋友说两句话，这些还有许多都不是我们寻常能够轻易了解的神秘。他离平的前一晚，我仍见到，那时候他还不知道他自陈南旅的飞机改期过3次。他曾说，如果再改下去。
Going through a lot of trouble to see a friend say a few words, these, and many more, are not mysteries that we can easily understand. I saw him the night before his flight. At that time, he didn't know that his flight to the south the next morning had been rescheduled 3 times. He once said that if it continued to be rescheduled,
他便不走了的。我和他同由一个茶会出来，在总部胡同口分手。在这茶会里，我们请的是为太平洋会议来的一个百雷博士， 因为她是志摩生平最爱慕的女作家曼舒菲尔的子丈，志摩十分的殷勤。
He won't leave. He and I came out of the same tea party and parted ways at the entrance of Zongbu Alley. He won't leave. He and I came out of the same tea party and parted ways at the entrance of Zongbu Alley. At this tea party, we invited Dr. Bai Lei, who came for the Pacific Conference, because he was the sister-in-law of Mansfield, the female writer whom Jima admired most in his life. Jima was very attentive.
希望可以再从百雷口中得些关于曼舒菲尔早年的影子，只因限于时间，我们查后匆匆的便散了。他真的是个怪人吗？朋友们，不，一点都不是，他只是比我们尽情尽力，比我们热诚，比我们天真。
I hope to get some more insights about Mansfield's early years from Bai Lei, but due to time constraints, we dispersed in a hurry after tea. Is he really a weirdo? Friends, no, not at all, he is just more affectionate, more sincere, and more naive than us.
比我们对万物都更有信仰，对神，对人，对灵，对自然，对艺术。他是对的，朋友们，归根说，我们能够懂得几个人，了解几桩事，几种情感。哪一桩事，哪一个人没有多面的看法？他早年很喜欢数学。
We have more faith in all things than we do, in God, in people, in spirits, in nature, and in art. He is right, friends. In the final analysis, how many people, how many things, how many emotions can we understand? What matter and what person does not have a multifaceted view? We have more faith in all things than we do, in God, in people, in spirits, in nature, and in art. He is right, friends. In the final analysis, how many people, how many things, how many emotions can we understand? What matter and what person does not have a multifaceted view? He loved mathematics in his early years.
他始终极喜欢天文，他对天上星宿的名字和部位就认得很多，最喜数夜观星，好几次他坐火车都是带着关于宇宙的科学的书。他曾经译过爱因斯坦的相对论。
He has always been very fond of astronomy. He knows a lot of the names and parts of the stars in the sky. He likes stargazing most on summer nights. He took the train several times with books about the science of the universe. He once translated Einstein's theory of relativity.
并且在1922年便写过一篇关于相对论的东西，登在《民铎》杂志上。他常向思成说笑，任公先生的相对论的知识还是从我徐君志摩大作上得来的呢。
In 1922, he wrote an article about the theory of relativity and published it in the magazine Minduo. He often joked to Sicheng, Mr. Rengong's knowledge of the theory of relativity came from my masterpiece, Su Junjima.
因为他说他看过许多关于爱因斯坦的哲学，都未曾看懂，看到志摩的那篇才懂了。他喜欢色彩，虽然他自己不会作画，暑假里他曾从杭州给我几封信，他自己叫他们做描写的水彩画。
Because he said that he had read a lot about Einstein's philosophy but never understood it. He only understood it after reading Shima's article. He likes colors, although he can't paint himself. During the summer vacation, he sent me several letters from Hangzhou. He called them descriptive watercolor paintings.
他用英文极细致地写出西边桑田的颜色，每一分嫩绿，每一色鹅黄，他都仔细地观察到。又有一次，他望着我园里一带断墙，半晌不语。过后，他告诉我说，他正在默默体会。
He wrote down the color of the mulberry fields in the west side, in English in great detail. He carefully observed every bit of green and every color of goose yellow. Another time he looked at the broken wall in my garden and remained silent for a long time. Afterwards, he told me that he was silently experiencing it.
想要描写那墙上向晚的艳阳和刚刚入秋的藤萝。今夏我在香山养病，他常来闲谈。有一天谈到他幼年上学的经过和美国克莱克大学2年学经济学的景况，我们不禁对笑了半天。
I want to describe the bright evening sun and the vines that have just entered autumn on the wall. This summer I was recuperating in Xiangshan, and he often came here to chat. One day he talked about his childhood schooling experience and his 2 years studying economics at Clark University in the United States. We couldn't help but laugh at each other for a long time.
后来他在他的《猛虎集》的序里也说了那么一段。可是奇怪的，他不像许多天才，幼年里上学不是不及格，便是被斥退，他是常得优等的。
Later, he also mentioned this passage in the preface of his Tiger collection. But strange. Unlike many geniuses who either failed or were kicked out of school when they were young, he often got top marks.
听说有一次康奈尔属校里一个极严的经济教授还写了信去克莱克大学教授那里恭维他的学生，关于一门很难的功课。人家说志摩的为人只是不经意的浪漫，志摩的诗全是抒情诗。
I heard that one time, a very strict economics professor at Cornell's summer school even wrote a letter to a professor at Clark University to compliment his students about a very difficult subject. People say that Jima is just casually romantic, and Jima's poems are all lyrical poems.
这段与从不认识他的人听来可以说很公平，从他朋友们看来实在是对不起他。 志摩是个很古怪的人，浪漫固然，但他人格里最精华的却是他对人的同情、和蔼和优容，没有一个人他对他不和蔼。
This assertion may sound fair to those who don't know him, but it is really a pity for him from the perspective of his friends. Jima is a very eccentric person. He is romantic, but the best thing about him is his sympathy, kindness, and kindness towards others. There is no one he is not kind to.
没有一种人他不能优容，没有一种的情感他绝对的不能表同情。为此说来，志摩的朋友之多不是个可怪的事，凡是认得他的人，不论深浅，对他全有特殊的感情，也是极为自然的结果。
There is no kind of person that he cannot be tolerant of, and there is no kind of emotion that he cannot express sympathy for. There is no kind of person that he cannot be tolerant of, and there is no kind of emotion that he cannot express sympathy for. For this reason, it is not surprising that Jima has so many friends. It is also a very natural result that everyone who knows him has special feelings for him, no matter how deep or shallow they are.
而反过来看他自己在他一生的过程中却是很少得着同情的。不止如是，他还曾为他的一点理想的愚诚几次几乎不见容于社会。但是他却未曾为这个比吝他给他人的同情心，他的性情。
On the other hand, he himself received very little sympathy in the course of his life. Not only that, he was almost not tolerated by society several times because of his foolish sincerity for his ideals. But he never begrudged his compassion for others and his temperament.
不曾为受了刺激而转变刻薄暴力过，谁能不承认他极有超人的宽谅？电报是9时从南京飞机场发出的，派车接去了，等到4点半，说飞机没有到，没有到。航空公司说济南有雾，很大。
Who has never turned into a mean and violent person because of being stimulated? Who can deny that he has a superhuman tolerance? The telegram was sent from Nanjing Airport at 9 o'clock. A car was sent to pick her up, but at 4:30, it was said that the plane had not arrived. I haven't arrived. The airline said it's foggy in Jinan. It's very heavy.
只是1个钟头的差别，下午3时到南苑，济南有雾。谁相信就是这1个钟头中便可以有这么不同事实的发生？志摩，我的朋友。是的，他19晨有电报来给我，定明早6时飞行，此去存亡不补，我怔住了。
It's just an hour's difference. When I arrived at Nanyuan at 3 p.m., it was foggy in Jinan. Who believes that such different facts can happen in just 1 hour? Shimo, my friend. Yes, he sent me a telegram on the morning of the 19th. He is scheduled to fly at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning, and his life or death is uncertain. I was stunned.
心中一阵不痛快，却忙给他一个电话。完全失意的信仰，我可要在这里哭了。也就是为这失意的信仰，他硬要借航空的方便达到他想飞的夙愿。飞机是很稳当的，他说，如果要出事，那是我的运命。
I felt unhappy for a while, but I hurriedly gave him a call. Completely poetic faith, I'm going to cry here. That is to say, because of this poetic belief, he insists on using the convenience of aviation to achieve his long-cherished wish of wanting to fly. The plane is very stable, he said. If something happens, it's my fate.
他针对运命这样完全失意的信仰。19早晨，是的，说下午3点准到南苑，派车见。刚是他开始飞行以后所发。你放心，他说很稳当的，我还要留着生命看更伟大的事迹呢，哪能变死？对于音乐
Such a completely poetic belief in destiny. On the morning of the 19th, yes. He said he would arrive at Nanyuan at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and send a car to pick him up. It was just after he started flying. Such a completely poetic belief in destiny. On the morning of the 19th, yes. He said he would arrive at Nanyuan at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and send a car to pick him up. It was just after he started flying. Don't worry. He said, it's very safe.
中西的他都爱好，不止爱好，他那种热心便唤醒过北京一次，也许唯一的一次对音乐的注意。谁也忘不了那一年，克拉斯拉到北京，在真光拉1个多钟头的提琴。对就句，他也得算在行。
He was interested in both Chinese and Western music, and his enthusiasm awakened Beijing's attention to music once, perhaps the only time. No one can forget that year, Klasla went to Beijing to play the violin at the True Light for more than an hour. He must also be considered good at old dramas.
他最后在北京那几天，我们曾接连的同去听好几出戏，回家时我们讨论的热闹，比任何剧评都诚恳都起劲。谁相信这样的一个人，这样忠实于生的一个人？
During the last few days when he was in Beijing, we went to listen to several plays together. When we returned home, we had lively discussions that were more sincere and energetic than any theater reviewer. Who believes in such a person who is so loyal to a life?
会这样早的永远的离开我们，另投一个世界，永远的竞技下去，不再透些许声息。我不敢再往下写。
He will leave us forever so early and join another world, where he will be silent forever and no longer make any sound. He will leave us forever so early and join another world, where he will be silent forever and no longer make any sound. I dare not write any more.
志摩若是有聆听到比他年轻许多的一个小朋友拿着老声老气的语调谈到他的为人，不觉得不快吗？这里我又来个极难堪的回忆。
If Jima had the spirit to hear a child who was much younger than him talk about his character in an old-fashioned tone, wouldn't he feel unhappy? Here I have another extremely embarrassing memory.
那一年，他在这同一个的报纸上写了那篇伤我父亲惨故的文章。这梦幻式的人生转了几个弯，曾几何时，却轮到我在这封锦夜深里握掉他的惨变。这是什么人生？什么风涛？什么道路？志摩。
That year he wrote the article about my father's tragic death in the same newspaper. This dreamlike life took several turns, but once upon a time, it was my turn to hold him and hang him in the windy night. Of tragic changes. What kind of life is this? What kind of wind? What road? Shima.
你这最后的解脱未始，不是幸福，不是聪明，我该当羡慕你才是。唯其是脆嫩。活在这非常富于刺激性的年头里，我敢喘一口气说，我相信一定有多数人成天里为观察听闻到的牵动了神经。
Your final liberation is not happiness or wisdom. I should envy you. But it's crispy and tender. Your final liberation is not happiness or wisdom. I should envy you. But it's crispy and tender. Living in these very stimulating years, I dare to take a breath and say that I believe there must be many people who have been disturbed by what they observe and hear all day long.
从跳动而有血裹着的心底下累积起各种的情感，直冲出嗓子，逼成了语言到舌头上来。这自然丰富的累积，有时更会轻易出少数人的唇舌，再奔进到笔尖上，另具形式，变成在白纸上驰骋的文字。
All kinds of emotions accumulated from the bottom of my beating and blood-coated heart, rushing out of my throat and forcing them into words on my tongue. This natural and rich accumulation sometimes overflows the lips and tongues of a few people, and then rushes to the tip of the pen, taking another form and turning into words galloping on the white paper.
这种文字便全是我们这个时代的出产，大家该千万珍视它。现在无论在哪里，假如有一个或多种的机会，我们能把许多这种自然触发出来的文字交出给同时代的大众见面。
This kind of writing is the product of our era, and everyone should cherish it. Now, no matter where we are, if there is one or more opportunities, we can hand over many of these naturally triggered words to the public of the same generation.
因而或能激动起更多方面、更复杂的情感，和由这情感而形成更多方式的文字，一直造成了一大片丰富而且有力的创作的田壤、森林、江山，产生结结实实的我们这个时代特有的表情和文章。
Therefore, it may inspire more aspects and more complex emotions, and form more forms of words from these emotions. It has always created a large area of rich and powerful creative fields, forests, rivers, and mountains, producing solid expressions and articles unique to our time.
我们该不该诚恳地注意到这机会或能造出的事业，个人将个人的一点点心血献出来尝试？难道现在我们这时代没有形形色色的人物，喜剧悲剧般的人生做题？难道我们现实没有美丽？
Should we sincerely pay attention to this opportunity or the career that can be created, and each of us dedicate a little bit of our efforts to try it? Isn't it possible that in our time there are not all kinds of characters and comic and tragic life themes? Don't we have beauty now?
没有风雅，没有丑陋、恐慌，没有感慨，没有希望。难道连经这些天灾人祸，我们都不会描述？深受这许多刺骨的辱痛，我们都不会愤慨高歌，尽出一缕滚沸的血流？这时代是我们特有的。
No elegance, no ugliness, no panic, no emotion, no hope. Don't we know how to describe these natural and man-made disasters? How can we not express indignation and sing out a stream of boiling blood after experiencing so many piercing humiliations? This era is unique to us.
结果，我们单有情感而没有表现这情绪的艺术，眼看着后代人笑我们是黑暗时代的哑子，没有艺术，没有文章，乃至于怀疑到我们有没有情感。至于一来就高举止，二来就气馁的作者。
As a result, we only have emotions but no art to express these emotions. We see future generations laughing at us as dumb people from the dark ages. We have no art and no articles, and even doubt whether we have emotions. As for the author who holds his toes high the first time and gets discouraged the second time.
每个时代都免不了有他们起落踪迹，这个与创作界主体的斩动指成枝节问题。哪一个创作兴旺的时代缺得了介绍散布作品的刊物，同纳或能同情或不了解的读众？脆嫩，唯其是脆嫩。
Their ups and downs are inevitable in every era. This is only a side issue with the development of the main body of the creative world. What era of flourishing creativity lacks publications that introduce and distribute works? Their ups and downs are inevitable in every era. This is only a side issue with the development of the main body of the creative world. What era of flourishing creativity lacks publications that introduce and distribute works, with readers who may sympathize with them or not understand them? Crispy and tender?
我们大家才更要来爱护它。线走遍人间是能刺激起创作的主力，尤其在中国这种日子，那一副眼睛看到了些什么，舌头底下不立刻紧急的想说话，乃至于歌气。
All of us must take care of it. Now traveling around the world is the main force that stimulates creation. Especially in China, on such a day, what do those eyes see, and the tongue doesn't immediately want to speak urgently, or even cry.
如果创作界仍然有点消沉寂寞的话，努力的少，尝试的稀罕，那或是有别的缘故而使然。我们问，能鼓励创作界的活跃性的是些什么？刊物是否可以救济这消沉的、努力于刊物的诞生的人们？
If the creative world is still a bit depressed and lonely, there are few efforts and few attempts, then there may be other reasons. We ask, what encourages activity in the creative community? Can publications help relieve this depression? People who work hard to create publications.
一定知道，刊物又时常会因为别的复杂原因而夭折的。它常是极脆嫩的孩，那么有创作冲动的笔锋，努力于刊物的手臂，此刻何不连在一起，再来一次合作，逼着创造界又挺出一个新鲜的萌芽。
You must know that publications often die due to other complicated reasons. It is always a very fragile child. You must know that publications often die due to other complicated reasons. It is always a very fragile child. With such creative writing skills and arms working hard on publications, why not join forces at this moment and cooperate again to force the creative world to sprout a fresh sprout?
管它将来能不能成田壤、成森林、成江山，一个萌芽是一个萌芽。我们可否直爽地承认一桩事？创作的鼓动时常要靠着刊物把它的成绩布散出去吹风、晒太阳和时代的读者把握的。被风吹冷了。
Regardless of whether it can become fields, forests, or rivers in the future, a sprout is a sprout. Can we admit something frankly? The encouragement of creation often relies on publications to spread its achievements out in the air, bask in the sun, and meet the readers of the times. Chilled by the wind.
太阳晒萎了，故常有的是。被读者所欢迎、所冷淡，或误会，或同情，归根应该都是激动创造力的要剂。希腊悲剧是在几万人前面唱演的，莎士比亚的戏更是街头巷尾的粗人看得到的。
The sun has withered, which is a common thing. Being welcomed, indifferent, misunderstood, or sympathized by readers should all be the medicine to stimulate creativity in the final analysis. Greek tragedies were sung and performed in front of tens of thousands of people, and Shakespeare's plays were seen by rough people in the streets.
到有刊物时代的欧洲，更不用说，一首诗文出来，人人争买着看。就是中国在印刷艰难的时候，也是什么传送一时，什么人手一抄等。回头再看到祖宗传留下那神气的衣钵，怎不觉得惭愧？说是乱。
In Europe in the era of publications, not to mention, when a poem comes out, everyone is eager to buy it. Even when China was having difficulties with printing, it was passed on and recited for a while. How can I not feel ashamed when I look back and see the mantle of dignity passed down from my ancestors? Talk about chaos in the world.
杜老头子过的是什么日子？辛稼轩当日的愤慨，当时我们同情。何必诉不完？创作的主力固在心底，但逼迫着这只有时间性的情绪语言而流淌在空间里的。
What kind of life does old man do live? Xin Jiaxuan's indignation that day should make us sympathize. Why bother to sue? The complaint will never end. What kind of life does old man do live? Xin Jiaxuan's indignation that day should make us sympathize. Why bother to sue? The complaint will never end.
却常是刊物这一类的鼓励和努力所促成。创作品是不能不与时代见面的，虽然作者的名姓则并不一定。伟大作品没有和本时代见面，而被他时代发现真实的固然有，但也只是偶然例外的事。
But it is often prompted by the encouragement and efforts of publications. Creative works cannot but meet the times, although the name of the author is not certain. There are great works that have not met our times, but there are some that were discovered and cherished by other times, but these are only occasional exceptions.
假使这里又有了机会连聚起许多人，为要介绍许多方面的文字，更进而研讨文章的质的方面，或指出以往文章的历程，或讲究到各种文章上比较的问题，进而无形地讲究到程度和标准等问题。
Suppose that there is an opportunity to gather many people here to introduce many aspects of the text, and further study the qualitative aspects of the article, or point out the history of previous articles, or pay attention to the comparative issues in various articles, and then invisibly it pays attention to issues such as level and standards.
我又敢相信，在这种情况下定会发生更严重鼓励写作的主动力，使创作界增加问题，或许唯其是增加了问题，才注意到创造界的活泼和健康。文艺绝不是蓬勃丛生的杂草。
I dare to believe that under this situation, there will be a more serious motivation to encourage writing. Adding problems to the creative community, perhaps. Only by increasing the number of problems does it contribute to the vitality and health of creation. Literature and art are by no. I dare to believe that under this situation, there will be a more serious motivation to encourage writing. Adding problems to the creative community, perhaps. Only by increasing the number of problems does it contribute to the vitality and health of creation. Literature and art are by no means overgrown weeds.
难道我们真麻木了不成？难道我们这时代的语词真贫穷的不能达意？难道我们这时代真没有学问，真没有文章？朋友们努力挺出根活的萌芽来，记着这个时代是我们的。山西通信，成。
Are we really numb? Is it true that the language of our time is so poor that it cannot express its meaning? Is it true that our era is really devoid of knowledge and articles? Friends, work hard to push forward the sprouts of vitality, and remember that this era belongs to us. Shangxi Communications. Times.
居然到了山西，天是透明的蓝，白云更流动的使人可以忘记很多的事，单单在一点什么感情底下打的溜转，更不用说到那山水、小堡垒、村落，反映着西洋的一角庙、一座塔。
When we arrived in Shangxi, the sky was transparent blue, and the white clouds were so flowing that people could forget a lot of things, just a little bit of emotion, not to mention the mountains, rivers, small fortresses, and villages reflecting the sunset. A corner temple, a tower.
景物是美的，到处使人心慌心痛。说起来，这个那个庙都是年代可多了，什么时候盖的，谁也说不清了。说话之人来的太多，我们工作实在发生困难了。可是我们大家都挺高兴的。
The scenery is so beautiful that it makes people panic and feel heartbroken. Speaking of this temple and that one, they are all very old. No one can tell when they were built. There were so many people talking that it was really difficult for us to work, but we were all very happy.
小孩子一边抱着饭碗吃饭，一边睁着大眼看，一点子也不松懈。由北平城里来的我们，东看看，西走走，夕阳背在背上，真和掉在另一个世界里一样。云快，天和我们之间似乎失掉了一切障碍。
The child was eating with his rice bowl in his arms and watching with wide eyes, not relaxing at all. We, who came from Peiping City, looked east and west and walked west, with the setting sun on our backs. It was like falling into another world. There seemed to be no barrier between the clouds, the sky, and us. The child was eating with his rice bowl in his arms and watching with wide eyes, not relaxing at all. We, who came from Peiping City, looked east and west and walked west, with the setting sun on our backs. It was like falling into another world. There seemed to be no barrier between the clouds, the sky, and us.
我乐时就高兴地笑，笑声一直散到对河对山，说不定哪一个林子，哪一个村落里去。我感觉到一种平坦，竟许是辽阔，和地面恰恰平行着舒展开来，感觉的最边沿的边沿和大地的边沿。
I laugh happily when I am having fun, and the laughter spreads all the way to the river and the mountains, maybe to which forest or village. I felt a kind of flatness, maybe even vastness, stretching out exactly parallel to the ground. The edge of the feeling was the edge of the earth.
永远赛着向前伸，寻日来眼看去的都是图画，日子都是可以歌唱的古事。黑夜里在山场里看河南来到山西的匠人，围住一个大红炉子打铁，火花和铿锵的声响散到四团黑影里去。
Always keep pushing forward. The 10 days that pass by are full of pictures, and the days are like ancient events that can be sung. In the dark night, I watched the craftsmen from Hunan and Shangxi in the mountain farm, surrounding a big red stove to forge iron. The fire and sonorous sound dispersed into 4 groups of black shadows.
微月中步行寻到田垄废庙，画一根曲灯，偷偷照看那瞭望观音的脸，一片平静。几百年来没有动过感情的，在那一闪光底下，倒像挂上一缕笑意。我是没有出过门的，没有动身之前不容易动。
In the light of the moon, I walked to find the abandoned temple in the field. I drew a lantern and secretly looked at the face looking at Guanyin. It was peaceful. For hundreds of years, there was no emotion, but under that flash of light, there seemed to be a smile. I have never been out, and it is difficult to move until I have started.
走出来之后，却就不知道如何流落才好。我们走时，总是一村子的人来送的，儿媳妇指着说给老婆婆听，小孩们跑着还要跟上一段路。开闸镇、小巷村、大巷村，哪一处不是一样的热闹？
After coming out, I don't know how to live in exile. When we leave, people from the village always come to deliver them. The daughter-in-law points them out to the old woman, and the children have to keep up with them for a while they run. Kaiza Town, Xiaoxiang Village, and Daxiang Village are all equally lively.
看到北齐天宝3年造像碑，我们不小心地露出一个惊异的叫喊，他们乡里弯着背的老点的人就也露出一个得意的微笑，知道他们村里的宝贝居然下着这古怪的来客了。
When we saw the statue of Tianbao in the 3rd year of the Northern Qi dynasty, we accidentally let out a cry of surprise. The older people in their village, with their bent backs, also showed a proud smile, knowing that the treasure in their village was actually scared. Here comes this strange visitor.
我们因为探访古迹走了许多路，在种种情形之下感慨到古今兴废。在草丛里读碑节，在砖堆中间偶然碰到菩萨的一双手一个微笑，都是可以激动起一些不平常的感觉来的。我不会说。
We took a lot of walks to visit historical sites. Under various circumstances we felt the ups and downs of the past and the present. Reading tablets in the grass, or accidentally encountering the hands and smile of a bodhisattva among the bricks can arouse some unusual feelings. I won't say.
说起来也只是一片疯话，人家不耐烦听。以我描写一些实际情形，我又不大会。总而言之，远地里一片田庙，有人在工作，上面青的、黄的、紫的分行的长着。每一处山坡上，有人在走路，放羊，迎着阳光。
It's just crazy talk that people can't bear to hear. I am not good at describing some actual situations. In short, in the distance, there are people working in a field temple, with green, yellow, and purple flowers growing in separate rows. On every hillside, there are people walking and herding sheep. Facing the sunshine.
背着阳光，投射着转动的光影。每一个小城前面站着城楼，旁边睡着小庙，那里又托出一座石塔。神和人都服帖的、满足的守着他们那一角天地。近地里则更有的是热闹，一条街里站满了人。
With the sun behind it, the rotating light and shadow are projected. In each small town, there is a city tower standing in front, and a small temple sleeping next to it. There is also a stone tower, and gods and people are obedient and contented, guarding their corner of the world. With the sun behind it, the rotating light and shadow are projected. In each small town, there is a city tower standing in front, and a small temple sleeping next to it. There is also a stone tower, and gods and people are obedient and contented, guarding their corner of the world.
孩子头上梳着3个小辫子的、4个小辫子的，乃至于5、6个小辫子的，衣服简单到只剩一个红兜肚，上面隐约也绣有他嬷嬷挑了2、3朵花。娘娘庙前面树荫底下，你又能阻止谁来看热闹？
Some of the children had 3, 4, or even 5 or 6 pigtails on their heads. Their clothes were so simple that only a red belly was left, and it was vaguely embroidered with 2 or 3 flowers chosen by her grandma. Some of the children had 3, 4, or even 5 or 6 pigtails on their heads. Their clothes were so simple that only a red belly was left, and it was vaguely embroidered with 2 or 3 flowers chosen by her grandma. Under the shade of the trees in front of the Empress Temple, who can you stop from watching the fun?
教书先生出来了，军队里兵卒拉着马过来了，几个女人娇羞的手拉着手，也扭着来站在一边了。小孩子争着挤，看我们照相，拉皮尺量平面，教书先生帮忙我们拓碑文。乡村的各种浪漫的位置。
The teacher came out, and the soldiers from the army came over with their horses. A few women shyly held hands and twisted to stand on one side. The children fought to squeeze in, watching us take pictures, and measuring the surface with a measuring tape. The teacher helped. We rubbed the inscription. Various romantic locations in the countryside.
秀丽天真，中间人物维持着老老实实的鲜艳颜色，老的扶着拐杖，小的赤着胸背，沿路上点缀的尽是他们明亮的眼睛和笑脸。年代多了吧？他们骄傲地问。多了多了，我们高兴地回答。
Beautiful and innocent, the figures in the middle maintain their bright colors. The old one is holding a cane, the young one is bare-chested, and their bright eyes and smiling faces are dotted along the road. Isn't it too beautiful and innocent? The figures in the middle maintain their bright colors. The old one is holding a cane, the young one is bare-chested, and their bright eyes and smiling faces are dotted along the road. Isn't it too old? They asked proudly.
差不多1400年了。呀，1400年，我们便一起骄傲起来。我们看看这里金元重修的，那里铭记重修的殿宇，讨论那式样做法的特异处，塑像神器，手续，天就渐渐黑下来，嘴里觉到渴，肚里觉到饿。
Almost 1400 years ago. 1400 years. We all became proud together. We looked at the temples rebuilt in the Jin dynasty here and the temples rebuilt in the Ming dynasty there, and discussed the peculiarities of the style, the look of the statues, and the procedures. The sky gradually became dark, and we felt thirsty in our mouths, feeling hungry.
才记起一天的日子，圆圆整整的就快结束了。回来躺在床上，绮丽鲜明的印象仍然挂在眼睛前边，引导着种种诗意的梦。同时，晚饭上所吃的菜蔬果子，便给养充实着我们明天的精力。
I just remembered that the whole day was about to end. When we come back and lie on the bed, the beautiful and vivid impression still hangs in front of our eyes, guiding us to all kinds of pleasant dreams. At the same time, the vegetables and fruits we eat for dinner will replenish our energy for tomorrow.
直到一大颗太阳红红的照在我们的脸上。窗子以外，话从哪里说起？等到你要说话，什么话都是那样渺茫的找不到个源头。此刻，就在我眼帘底下坐着是4个乡下人的背影。
Until a big sun shines redly on our faces. Outside the window. Where do you start talking? When you want to speak, it is so difficult to find the source of any words. At this moment, sitting right in front of my eyes were the back figures of 4 country people.
一个头上包着暗黑的白布，2个褪色的蓝布，又一个光头。他们支起膝盖，半蹲半坐的在稀岩的短墙上休息。每人手里一件简单的东西，一个是白木棒，一个篮子，那2个在树荫底下我看不清楚。
One head was wrapped in dark white cloth, 2 had faded blue cloth, and the other had a bald head. They raised their knees, half squatting and half sitting, resting on the short wall along the stream. Each person held a simple thing, a white wooden stick and a basket. I couldn't see the 2 clearly under the shade of the tree.
无疑的，他们已经走了许多路，再过一刻，抽完一桶旱烟以后，是还要走许多路的。兰花烟的香味频频随着微风袭到我关觉上来，模糊中还有几段山西梆子的声调。
Undoubtedly, they have walked a long way, and in a moment, after smoking a pipe of dry cigarettes, they will still have to walk a long way. The fragrance of orchid smoke frequently hits my senses with the breeze, and there are also a few tones of Shangxi Bangzi in the blur.
虽然他们坐的地方是在我廊子的铁纱窗以外，隔着一个窗子，你还想明白多少事？昨天雇来旅行倒水，今天又学洋鬼子东逛西逛，跑到下面养有鸡羊，上面挂有5魁匾额的人家。
Even though they were sitting outside the screened windows of my porch. How many things do you still want to understand through a window? Yesterday I hired someone surnamed Lu to pour water, and today I imitated the foreign devils and wandered around, going to a house with chickens and sheep below, and a plaque with Wu Kuei hanging on it.
让他们用你不懂得的乡音招呼你吃菜，炕上坐，坐了半天出到门口，和那送客的女人周旋客气了一回，才恍然大悟，她就是替你倒脏水洗衣裳的吕姓王孙的妈，前晚上还送饼到你家来过。
Let them greet you with a local accent that you don't understand, eat food, sit on the kong, sit for a long time, go out to the door, and be polite with the woman who sees you off, and then suddenly realize that she is the surnamed Lu who pours dirty water for you to wash clothes. Wang's son's mother even sent cakes to your house the night before.
陕西过来做生意的老头和那旁坐的一股客气是不得已的，由交城下车的客人执着红粉包纸烟递到汽车行管事手里也是有多少理由的。穿棉背心的老太婆默默地协助一个蓝布包袱。
The old man who came from Shangxi for business and the politeness sitting next to him were forced to do so. The customer who got off the bus from Jiaoqing had some reasons for handing the red packet of cigarettes to the steward of the car dealership. The old woman in a cotton vest silently held the cigarette lid in a blue cloth bag.
一个钱包是在用尽他的全副本领的，果然到了季村，他错过站头，还亏别个客人替他要求车夫将汽车退行2里路，他还不大相信地望着那村站，口里噜苏着这地方和上次如何两样了。
A purse was obtained after she had used up all her money. Sure enough, when she arrived at Jitsuan, she missed the stop. Fortunately, another customer asked the driver to move the car back 2 miles. She looked at the village in disbelief. I stood there, mumbling about how this place was different from last time.
开车的一面发牢骚，一面爬到车顶替老太婆拿行李，经验使得他有一种涵养，行李中少不了有认不得路的老太太。这个道理全世界是一样的，伦敦警察之所以特别和蔼。
While driving, he grumbled and climbed onto the roof of the car to help the old woman carry her luggage. His experience gave him a certain kind of discipline. Old ladies who don't know the road are inevitable when traveling. This principle is the same all over the world. The reason why the London police are so kind.
也是从迷路的老太太孩子们身上得来的。铁纱窗以外，话可不就在这里了。永远是窗子以外，不是铁纱窗就是玻璃窗。总而言之，窗子以外，那里不是没有颜色、声音、声的一切活动。
I also got it from the lost old ladies and children. Outside the iron screen window, the words don't stop here. Always outside the window, either a screen window or a glass window, in short, outside the window. It is not without colors, sounds, and all life activities.
只是他们和你总隔个窗子，扇子似的，6边形的，煞的，玻璃的。那点子奢侈在那人身上所发生的喜悦，在你身上却完全失掉作用，没有闪一星星亮光的希望。你想，整年整月你所花费的。
It's just that there is always a window between them and you, fan-shaped, hexagonal, gauze, glass. The joy that extravagant idea brought to that person has completely lost its effect on you, and there is no hope of shining a star. You think, what you spent throughout the entire month.
和你那窗子以外的周围生活程度一比较，严格算来，可不都是非常糜费的用途。每奢侈一次，你心上只有多难过一次，所以车子经过的那些玻璃窗口，只有使你更惶恐、更空洞、更怀疑。
Comparing it with the standard of living around you outside your window, strictly speaking, aren't they all very wasteful? Every time you spend extravagantly, you will only feel sad once more, so the glass windows the car passes by will only make you more frightened, hollow and doubtful.
前后彷徨不着边际，并且看了店里那些形形色色的货物，除非你真是傻子，难道不晓得他们多半是由哪一国工厂里制造出来的？ 奢侈是不能给你愉快的，它只有要加增你的戒惧烦恼。
Hesitating before and after. And after looking at the various goods in the store, unless you are really stupid, don't you know which country's factories they are mostly made by? Luxury cannot bring you happiness, it can only increase your worries and worries.
每一尺好看点的纱料，每一件新鲜点的工艺品，这里到底是隔个窗子，你不懂了，一样年年好收成。为什么这几年村子穷了，只模模糊糊听到什么军队住了3年多等，更不懂事。
Every foot of beautiful yarn and every fresh handicraft. This place is separated by windows. You don't understand. The harvest is good every year. Why has the village become poor in the past few years? Every foot of beautiful yarn and every fresh handicraft. This place is separated by windows. You don't understand. The harvest is good every year. Why has the village become poor in the past few years? I only vaguely heard that the army has been stationed for more than 3 years, and I don't understand.
村子向上1年辛苦后的娱乐，关帝庙里唱唱戏，给上面使钱。既然隔个窗子听不明白，你就通气点，别尽管问了。这真是难得了，并且好感的由来还有实证，就是那一天早上你无意中出去探谷寻胜。
The village's entertainment after a year of hard work, singing and opera in the Guandi temple, does it require money from the boss? Since you can't understand through a window, just ventilate your voice and stop asking. This is really rare, and there is evidence for the origin of the goodwill. It was that morning that you accidentally went out to explore ancient times.
这一省山明水秀，古刹寺院，动不动就是宋辽的原物。走到山上一个小村的关帝庙里，看到一个铁铎刻着万历年号，原来是万历赐这村里庆成王的后人的，不知怎样流落到卖古董的手里。
The mountains and rivers in this province are beautiful, and the ancient temples and temples are often the originals of the Song and Liao dynasties. When I walked to the Guandi temple in a small village on the mountain, I saw an iron altar with the Wanli year number engraved on it. It turned out that Wanli gave this village Qingqing the property of the king's descendants somehow ended up in the hands of antique sellers.
7年前让这牧师买去，晚上打着玩，嘹亮的钟声被村人听到，急忙赶来打听，要凑原价买回，情辞恳切。说起这是他们吕姓的祖传宝物，绝不能让它流落出境。这牧师于是真个把铁铎还了他们。
I asked the pastor to buy it 7 years ago. I was playing with it at night. The loud ringing of the bell was heard by the villagers. They hurriedly came to inquire about it and wanted to buy it back at the original price. They expressed their sincere. I asked the pastor to buy it 7 years ago. I was playing with it at night. The loud ringing of the bell was heard by the villagers. They hurriedly came to inquire about it and wanted to buy it back at the original price.
从此便在关帝庙神前供着。这样一来，你的窗子前面便展开了一张浪漫的图画，打动了你的好奇。管它是隔1层或2层窗子，你也忍不住要打听点底细，怎么明庆成王的后人会姓吕。
From then on, it was worshipped in front of the Guandi temple. In this way, a romantic picture unfolds in front of your window, which piques your curiosity. Regardless of whether it is 1 or 2 windows away, from then on, it was worshipped in front of the Guandi temple. In this way, a romantic picture unfolds in front of your window, which piques your curiosity. Regardless of whether it is 1 or 2 windows away, you can't help but want to find out the details. How did Ming Qing become the king's concubine? People will be named Lu.
这下子文章变长了，这样一来你就有点心跳了。昨天你过来那打水洗衣服的不也是赵庄村来的，并且还姓吕？果然那土头土脑圆脸大眼的少年是个皇裔贵族，真是有失尊敬了。
Now the article is quite long. This makes your heart beat a little. The man you hired to fetch water and wash clothes yesterday is also from Zhaozhuang village, and his surname is Lu. As expected, the rustic, round-faced, big-eyed young man was a nobleman of royal descent, which was really disrespectful.
那么这村子一定穷不了，但事实上则不见得。车越走越远了，前面正碰着粪车，立刻你拿出手绢来，皱着眉，把鼻子蒙得紧紧的，心里不知怨谁好。车开始碾动了，世界仍然在你窗子以外。
Then this village must not be poor, but in fact this is not necessarily the case. The car was going farther and farther, and it bumped into a dung truck in front of it. You immediately took out your handkerchief, frowned, and covered your nose tightly, not knowing who to blame. The car starts to roll, but the world is still outside your window.
长长的一条胡同，一个个大门紧紧地关着，就是有开的，那也只是露出一角，隐约可以看到里面有南瓜棚子，底下一个女的坐在小凳上缝缝做做的，另一个抓住还不能走路的小孩子。
There is a long alley, and the gates are tightly closed. Even if it is open, it only exposes a corner. You can vaguely see a pumpkin shed inside, with a woman sitting on a small stool sewing at the bottom. The other is holding a child who can't walk yet.
伸出头来喊那过路卖白菜的。至于白菜是多少钱1斤，那你是听不见了，车子早已拉得老远，并且你也无需乎知道的。在你每月费用之中，伙食是一定占去若干的。在那一笔伙食费里，
He stretched out his head and called to the cabbage seller passing by. As for how much cabbage costs per pound, you can't hear it. He stretched out his head and called to the cabbage seller passing by. As for how much cabbage costs per pound, you can't hear it. The car is already far away, and you don't need to know. Food will definitely account for a certain amount of your monthly expenses. In that meal fee.
白菜又是多么小的一个数，难道你知道了门口卖的白菜多少钱一斤？你真把你哭丧着脸的厨子叫来申斥一顿，告诉他每一斤白菜他多开了你一个大字儿。路渐渐好起来。
Cabbage is such a small number. Could it be that if you knew how much a pound of cabbage sold at the door cost, would you really call your sullen cook to reprimand him and tell him that for every pound of cabbage he paid you an extra big buck? The road is getting better gradually.
前面墙高高的是个大衙门，这里你简直不止隔个窗子，这一带高高的墙是不通风的。你不懂里面有多少办事员，办的都是什么事，多少浓眉大眼的对着乡下人做买卖的吆喝榨取。
The high wall in front is a large government office. Here you are almost separated by windows. The high walls in this area are not ventilated. You don't know how many clerks there are and what they are doing, how many thick-browed and big-eyed people are yelling at the country people to do business and defraud them.
多少个又是脸黄黄的可怜虫，混半碗饭分给一家子吃。自欺欺人，里面天天演的到底是什么把戏？但是如果里面真有2、3个人拼了命在那里奋斗，为许多人争一点便利和公道，你也无从知道。
How many wretches with sallow faces gave half a bowl of rice to the whole family? Deceiving yourself and others, what kind of tricks are you playing every day? But if there are really 2 or 3 people inside who are fighting desperately for a little convenience and justice for many people, you have no way of knowing.
话说了这许多，你仍然在廊子底下坐着，窗外送来细流的喧响，兰花烟气味早已消失。4个乡下人这时候当已到了上流庆和驿磨坊前面。昨天那里磨坊的伙计很好笑的，满脸挂着面粉。
Having said so much, you are still sitting under the porch, with the noise of the stream coming from the window, and the smell of orchid smoke has long since disappeared. At this time, the 4 country people must have arrived in front of the upstream Kingiai mill. Yesterday, the mill boy there was so funny that he had flour all over his face.
让你看着磨坊的构造，方下的木轮，屋里旋转着的石碾，又在高低的院落里来回看你所不经见的农具在日影下列着。院中一棵老槐，一丛鲜艳的杂花，一条曲曲折折引水的沟渠，伙计和气地说闲话。
Let you look at the structure of the mill, the wooden wheel under the mill, the rotating stone mill in the house, and in the high and low courtyards, you can see farm tools that you have never seen before, under the shadow of the sun. Let you look at the structure of the mill, the wooden wheel under the mill, the rotating stone mill in the house, and in the high and low courtyards, you can see farm tools that you have never seen before, under the shadow of the sun. In the courtyard, there is an old locust tree, a clump of bright miscellaneous flowers, and a winding ditch that diverts water, and the waiters chatted in a friendly manner.
他用着山西口音告诉你，那里一年可出5000多包的麦粉，每包的价钱约略2块多钱。又说这10几年来，这一带因为山水忽然少了，磨坊关闭了多少家，外国人都把那些磨坊租去做他们避暑的别墅。
He told you in a Shaanxi accent that more than 5,000 bags of wheat flour can be produced there a year, and each bag costs about 2 yuan. He also said that in the past 10 years, many mills have been closed due to the sudden loss of mountains and rivers in this area, and foreigners have rented those mills as their summer villas.
惭愧的你说，你就是住在一个磨坊里面。他脸上堆起微笑，让面粉一星星在日光下映着，说认得认得，原来你所租的磨坊主人，一个外国牧师，带着村子及和气，乡下人和他还都有好感情。天幕一片。
Ashamed, you said that you lived in a mill. He put a smile on his face, letting the stars of flour shine in the sun, and said that he recognized it. It turns out that the owner of the mill you rented, a foreign priest, treated this village very well. He was kind, and the country people still had good feelings for him. An acre of land.
年年收成也不坏，家家户户门口有特种围墙，像个小小堡垒，当时防匪用的。屋子里面有大漆衣柜衣箱，柜门上白铜擦得亮亮，炕上棉被红红绿绿，也颇鲜艳。可是据说关帝庙里已有4年没有唱戏了。
The harvest is not bad every year. There is a special wall at the door of every house, like a small fortress. It was used to prevent bandits at that time. There are large lacquered wardrobes and suitcases in the house, and the white copper on the cabinet doors is brightly polished. The quilts on the Kong are also very bright red and green. The harvest is not bad every year. There is a special wall at the door of every house, like a small fortress. It was used to prevent bandits at that time. There are large lacquered wardrobes and suitcases in the house, and the white copper on the cabinet doors is brightly polished. The quilts on the Kong are also very bright red and green. But it is said that there has been no opera singing.
虽然戏台还高微微地对着正殿，村子这几年穷了，有一位王孙告诉你，唱戏太花钱，尤其是上边使钱。热烈的 必须的，在车马纷纭的街心里，忽然由你车边冲出来2个人，男的、女的。
Although the stage is still facing the main hall majestically. The village has become poor in recent years, and a grandson of the prince told you that singing opera is too expensive, especially if the money is paid by the superiors. It's warm and necessary. In the middle of the street with lots of cars and horses, 2 people suddenly rush out from beside your car, a man and a woman.
哥哥提起2脚快跑，这又是干什么的？你心想，电车正在拐大弯，那2人员就追着电车由轨道旁边擦过去，一边追着，一边向电车上卖票的说话。电车是不容易赶的。
Each one picked up his feet and ran quickly. What's this for, you think to yourself, as the tram takes a sharp turn. The 2 men were chasing the tram and passing by the track. While chasing, they were talking to the ticket seller on the tram. It's not easy to catch the train.
你在洋车上真不禁替那街心里奔走赶车的担心，但是你也知道，如果这趟没赶上，他们就可以在街旁站个半点来钟。那些宁可盼穿秋水不顾洋车的人。
When you are in a foreign car, you really can't help but feel worried about rushing around in the street to catch the car. But you also know that if they don't make it this time, they can stand on the street for half an hour, those who would rather wait for a fortune than hire a foreign car.
也就是因为他们的生活而必须计较和节省到洋车同电车价钱上那相差的数目。没想到，不管你走到那里，你永远免不了坐在窗子以内的。不错，许多时髦的学者常常骄傲地带上考察的神器。
That is because their lives require them to calculate and save the difference in price between a foreign car and a tram. Unexpectedly, no matter where you go, you will always be sitting inside a window. It is true that many fashionable scholars often proudly carry the air of investigation.
架上科学的眼镜，偶然走到那里一个陌生的地方瞭望，但那无形中的窗子是仍然存在的。此刻洋车跑得很快，你心里继续着疑问：你出来的目的到底采办一些什么必须的货物？
Putting on scientific glasses, I accidentally walked to a strange place and took a look, but the invisible window still existed. At this moment, the foreign car is running very fast, and you are constantly questioning the purpose of your trip, and what necessary goods you have purchased.
眼看着男男女女挤在市场里面，门手出来一个进去一个，手里都是持着包包裹裹，里边虽然不会全是他们当日所必须的，但是如果当中夹着一盒稍微奢侈的物品。
Seeing men and women crowding in the market, one comes out of the door and goes in, holding packages in their hands. Although not all of them are what they need for the day, if there is a box of slightly luxurious items among them.
则亦必是他们生活中间闪着亮光的一个愉快。接触和认识实在谈不到，得天独厚的闲暇生活先不容易。一样是旅行，如果你背上钱的不是照相机，而是一点做买卖的小血本。
It must also be a shining joy in their lives. Contact and acquaintance are really out of the question, and the leisure life you are blessed with will not allow you to do so. It's the same as traveling, if what you carry on your back is not a camera but a little capital for business. It must also be a shining joy in their lives. Contact and acquaintance are really out of the question, and the leisure life you are blessed with will not allow you to do so. It's the same as traveling, if what you carry on your back is not a camera but a little capital for business.
你就需要全副的精神来走路，你得留神投宿的地方，你得计算一路上每吃一次烧饼和几颗沙果的钱，遇着同行的战战兢兢的打招呼，互相捧出诚意，遇着困难时好，互相关照帮忙。
You need to be full of energy to walk. You have to pay attention to the place where you stay. You have to calculate the cost of each sesame seed cake and a few sand nuts you eat along the way. You need to greet your peers cautiously and show sincerity to each other. And when you encounter difficulties, it's good to look after and help each other.
到了一个地方，你是真带着整个血肉的身体到处碰运气，紧张的境遇不容你不奋斗，不与其他奋斗的血和肉的接触，直到经验使得你认识，所有的活动的颜色、声音、声的滋味，全在那里的。
When you arrive at a place, you are really taking your whole flesh and blood body everywhere to try your luck. The tense situation does not allow you not to struggle and not to come into contact with other struggling flesh and blood until experience makes you understand. All the moving colors, sounds, and tastes of life are all there.
你并不是不能看到，只不过是永远的在你窗子以外罢了。愿天做的事太古怪，好好的美丽的稻麦却需要粪来浇。愿乡下人太不怕臭，不怕脏，发明那么2个篮子放在鼻前手车上，推着慢慢走。
It's not that you can't see it, it's just that it's always outside your window. I blame heaven for doing such weird things. The good and beautiful rice and wheat need manure to water them. I blame the country people for not being afraid of smells and dirt, so I invented 2 baskets, put them on the cart in front of my nose, and pushed them slowly.
你院市里行政人员不认真办事，如此脏臭不卫生的旧习不能改良，11年来对这份车难道真无办法？为这强烈的臭气隔着你窗子还不够远，因此你想到社会卫生事业如何还办不好。
You blame the city administrators for not taking things seriously, and the old habits that are so dirty, smelly, and unhygienic cannot be improved. Is there really nothing you can do about the dung trucks in the past 10 years? Because the strong stench is not far enough from your window, you think about how to handle social sanitation services.
如果你的祖宗是皇帝的嫡亲弟弟，你是不会也不愿忘掉的。据说庆成王是永乐的弟弟，这赵庄村里的人都是他的后代。不过就是因为他们记得太清楚了，另一朝的皇帝都有些老大不放心。
If your ancestor is the emperor's direct brother, you will not, nor want to, forget it. It is said that King Qingsheng is the younger brother of Yongle, and everyone in Zhaozhuang village is his descendant. But just because they remembered it so clearly, the emperors of the other dynasty were a little worried.
雍正间诏命他们改姓，由姓朱改为姓吕，但是他们还有用20字排行的方法，使得他们不会弄错他们是这一脉子孙。多少百里的平原土地，多少区域的起伏的山峦，昨天由窗子外映进你的眼帘。
During Yongzheng's reign, they were ordered to change their surname from Zhu to Lu, but they also used the method of ranking them in 20-digit numbers so that they would not mistake them for being descendants of this lineage. Hundreds of miles of plain land and countless areas of rolling mountains were reflected in your eyes from the window yesterday.
那是多少生命日夜在活动着的所在，每一根青的什么麦黍都有人流过汗，每一粒黄的什么米粟都有人吃去，其间还有的是周折，是热闹，是紧张。可是你则并不一定能看见，因为那所有的周折、热闹。
It was a place where so many lives were active day and night. For every green millet, someone had sweated. For every yellow grain, someone had eaten it. There were also twists and turns, excitement and tension. But you may not be able to see it, because of all the twists and turns and excitement.
紧张全都在你窗子以外展演着。在家里罢，你坐在书房里，窗子以外的景物本就有限。那里2束马缨，几棵丁香，榆叶梅横出风的一大枝，海棠因为缺乏阳光，每年只开个2-3朵。
Nervousness is all playing out outside your window. At home, when you sit in the study, the scenery outside the window is limited. There are 2 tassel trees and a few lilac trees there, a large branch of eucalyptus leaves spread out in the wind. Due to lack of sunlight, only 2 or 3 crabapples bloom every year.
叶子上满是虫蚁吃的疮痕，还卷着一点焦黄的边。廊子优秀的开着扇子式6边形的格子窗，透过外院的日光，外院的杂音。什么送煤的来了？偶然你看到1个2个被煤炭染成浅黑的脸。
The leaves are full of scars from insects and ants, and are still curled up with a little browned edge. The corridor is open like a fan, with hexagonal lattice windows, letting in the sunlight and noise from the outer courtyard. When the coal messenger comes, you may see 1 or 2 faces stained black by coal.
什么米送到了？一个人钳着一大口袋在背上，慢慢踱过平门，还有自来水、电灯、电话公司来收账的，胸口斜挂着皮口袋，手里推着一辆自行车，更有时厨子来个朋友了，满脸的笑容，好呀，好呀。
Some rice was delivered, a man carrying a large bag on his back, walking slowly through the screen door. There was also running water, and a person from the electric light and telephone company came to collect the bill, with a leather bag hanging diagonally on his chest, pushing a bicycle in his hand. Sometimes the cook comes over with a friend, with a smile on his face. Okay. Some rice was delivered, a man carrying a large bag on his back, walking slowly through the screen door. There was also running water, and a person from the electric light and telephone company came to collect the bill, with a leather bag hanging diagonally on his chest, pushing a bicycle in his hand. Sometimes the cook comes over with a friend, with a smile on his face. Okay, okay.
弟走进门房，什么赵妈的丈夫来拿钱了，那是每月1号一点都不差的。早来了你就听到2个人叽叽哝哝争吵的声浪。前日公共汽车里一列辛苦的脸，那些谈话里面就有很多生活的分量。
You walked into the concierge. Zhao Ma's husband came to get the money, which is not bad at all on the 1st of every month. You walked into the concierge. Zhao Ma's husband came to get the money, which is not bad at all on the 1st of every month. When he came early, you heard the sound of the 2 people quarreling. The row of hard-working faces on the bus the day before yesterday.
到了热闹的大街了，你仍然像在特别包厢里看戏一样，本身不会，也不必参加那出戏。倚在栏杆上，你在审美的领略，你有的是一片闲暇。但是如果这里洋车夫问你在哪里下来，你会吃一惊。
When you arrive on the busy street, you are still as if you are watching a play in a special box. You don't know how to do it, and you don't have to participate in the play. Leaning on the railing, you are appreciating the aesthetics, and you have plenty of leisure. But if a rickshaw driver here asks you where you got off, you will be surprised.
仓促不知所答，生活所最必须的你并不缺乏什么，你这出来就也是不必须的活动。偶一抬头，看到街心河对街铺子前面那些人，他们都是急急忙忙的。
He didn't know the answer in a hurry. You don't lack anything that is most necessary for life, and your activities are unnecessary. When I looked up, I saw people in the middle of the street and in front of the shops across the street. They were all in a hurry.
在时间金钱的限制下采办他们生活所必须的。你诅咒着城市生活，不自然的城市生活。检点行装说，走了，走了，这沉闷没有生气的生活实在受不了，我要换个样子过活去。
Purchasing the necessities for their lives within the constraints of time and money. You curse city life, unnatural city life. Purchasing the necessities for their lives within the constraints of time and money. You curse city life, unnatural city life. I checked my luggage and said, let's go, let's go. I really can't bear this dull and lifeless life. I want to live a different life.
健康的旅行既可以看看山水谷刹的名胜，又可以知道点内地淳朴的人情风俗。走了，走了，天气还不算太坏，就是走它1个月6礼拜也是值得的。你气闷了，把比一哥说，这叫做什么生活？你站起来。
A healthy trip can not only see the scenic spots of mountains, rivers, and ancient temples, but also learn about the simple people and customs in the mainland. After leaving, the weather is not too bad, and it is worth traveling for 6 weeks a month. You get frustrated, put down your pen and say, what kind of life is this? A healthy trip can not only see the scenic spots of mountains, rivers, and ancient temples, but also learn about the simple people and customs in the mainland. After leaving, the weather is not too bad, and it is worth traveling for 6 weeks a month. You get frustrated, put down your pen and say, what kind of life is this? You stand up.
穿上不能算太贵的鞋袜，但这双鞋和袜的价钱也就比，想他做什么？反正有人每月的工资一定只有这价钱的一半，乃至于更少。你是仍然坐在窗子以内的，不是火车的窗子，汽车的窗子。
Wear shoes and socks that are not too expensive, but the price of this pair of shoes and socks is only, no matter what, someone's monthly salary must be only half of this price or even less. You are still sitting inside the window, not a train window or a car window.
就是客栈逆旅的窗子，再不然就是你自己无形中习惯的窗子，把你搁在里面。你出去雇洋车了，拉车的嘴里所讨的价钱当然是要比例价高得多，难道你就傻子似的答应下来？不，32字。
It's the window of an inn where you go against your travels, or it's the window you're used to invisibly, putting you inside. You went out to hire a foreign truck. Of course the price negotiated by the driver was much higher than the price. Did you just agree like a fool? No, 32 sons.
拉就拉，不拉拉倒。心里也明白，如果真要冲内行，你就该说26字，拉就拉。但是你好意思争？你不是听见那人说吗？里面草帽1块8毛5，贵倒贵点，可是真不赖。他提一提帽和向着打招呼的朋友。
If you pull it, pull it. If you don't pull it, pull it down. If you pull it, pull it. If you don't pull it, pull it down. I also know in my heart that if you really want to be an expert, you should say, 26 sons, just pull it. But you have the nerve to argue. Didn't you hear that person say? The straw hat inside costs 85 cents a dollar, which is a bit expensive, but really good. He lifted his hatbox and greeted his friend.
他摸一摸他那剃得光整的脑袋，微笑充满了他全个脸。那时那一点迸射着光闪的愉快，当然的归属于他享受，没有一点疑问，因为天知道这一年中他多少次地克几省俭，使他赚来这一次美满的。
He touched his shaved head, and a smile filled his face. The gleaming joy at that time was of course his enjoyment, without any doubt, because God knows how many times he had practiced self-denial and frugality in this year, which enabled him to earn this happy life.
大胆的奢侈。于是那两边的争持是热烈的，必须的，大家声音都高一点。女人脸上成块红色，头发披下的一缕，又用手抓上去。伙计则维持着客气，口里嚷着错不了，错不了。
Bold luxury. So the argument between the two sides was heated and necessary, and everyone's voice was louder. The woman's face turned red, and a strand of hair fell down, and she grabbed it with her hands. The guy remained polite and shouted, "Can't be wrong, can't be wrong."
两个女人手忙脚乱地在监督着店里的伙计称，2斤4两，2斤4两的什么东西，且不必去管，反正由那两个女人的认真的神气上面看去，必是非同小可、性命交关的货物。
Two women were busy supervising the store clerk's scales. Don't worry about the 2 kilograms and 40 taels. Anyway, from the serious looks on the two women's faces, it must be something of great importance, a life-threatening commodity.
并且，如果称得少一点时，那两个女人为那点吃亏的分量必定感到重大的痛苦；如果称得多时，那伙计又知道这年头那损失在东家方面真不能算小。不管你的窗子朝向哪里望。
And if the scale is less, the two women must feel great pain because of the loss. If the scale is longer, then the man knows that the loss is really not small for the boss these days. No matter where your window looks.
所看到的多半则仍是在你窗子以外隔层玻璃或是铁砂。隐隐约约你看到一些颜色，听到一些声音，如果你私下满足了，那也没有什么，只是千万别高兴起说什么接触了、认识了若干事物人情。
Most of what you see is still outside your window, the partition glass, or the iron screen. You vaguely see some colors and hear some sounds. If you are satisfied privately, it doesn't matter. Most of what you see is still outside your window, the partition glass, or the iron screen. You vaguely see some colors and hear some sounds. If you are satisfied privately, it doesn't matter.
天知道那是罪过，洋鬼子们的一些浅薄千万学不得。不信，你检查他们的行李，有谁不带着罐头食品、帆布床以及别的证明你还在你窗子以内的种种零星用品？你再摸一摸他们的皮包。
God knows that's a sin. You must never learn from the shallowness of the foreign devils. If you don't believe me, check their luggage. If anyone doesn't bring canned food, a cot, and other odds and ends that prove you're still inside your window, touch their purse.
那里短不了有些钞票，一到一个地方，你有的是一个提梁的小小世界。这里你迷糊了。算了算了，你简直老老实实的坐在你窗子里得了，窗子以外的事，你看了多少也是枉然，大半你是不明白。
There can't be any money there. Once you get to a place, you have a small world. You are confused here. Forget it, forget it. You are just sitting in your window, but it is in vain that you look at things outside the window, and most of them you don't understand.
也不会明白的。纪念志摩去世4周年，今天是你走脱这世界的4周年。朋友，我们这次拿什么来纪念你？前2次的用香花感伤的围上你的照片，溢出嗓子底下叹息和悲梗。
I won't understand either. To commemorate the 4th anniversary of Shima's death. Today is the 4th anniversary of your leaving this world. My friend, what can we do to commemorate you this time? The first 2 times, I sentimentally surrounded your photos with fragrant flowers, suppressing the sighs and sadness in my throat. I won't understand either. To commemorate the 4th anniversary of Shima's death. Today is the 4th anniversary of your leaving this world. My friend, what can we do to commemorate you this time? The first 2 times, I sentimentally surrounded your photos with fragrant flowers, suppressing the sighs and sadness in my throat.
朋友和朋友无聊地对望着，完成一种纪念的形式，俨然是愚蠢的失败。因为那是那种近于伤感而又不够宗教庄严的举动，除却点明了你和我们中间的距离，生和死的间隔外，实在没有别的成效。
Friends looked at each other boredly, completing a form of commemoration, which seemed like a stupid failure. Because at that time, the behavior that was close to sadness but not religiously solemn had no other effect except to highlight the distance between you and us, the gap between life and death.
几乎完全不能达到任何真实纪念的意义。去年今日，我意外地由浙南路过你的家乡，在昏沉的夜色里，我独立火车门外，凝望着那幽暗的站台，默默地回忆许多不相连续的过往残片。
It almost completely fails to achieve any real commemorative significance. Last year today, I unexpectedly passed by your hometown from southern Zhejiang. In the gloomy night, I stood outside the train door and stared at the gloomy platform, silently recalling many discontinuous fragments of the past.
直到生和死间居然换成一片模糊，人生和火车似的蜿蜒一串疑问在苍茫间奔驰。我想起你的火车擒住轨在黑夜里奔，过山过水过，间接的你任凭自然的音乐颜色不时的风清月白。
Until the world between life and death becomes a blur, and life is like a train, a series of questions running through the vastness. I think of your. The train caught the rails and ran in the dark dash. Over mountains, over rivers, over. Until the world between life and death becomes a blur, and life is like a train, a series of questions running through the vastness. I think of your. The train caught the rails and ran in the dark dash. Over mountains, over rivers, over. Indirectly, you let the natural rhythm, color, and the gentle breeze and white moonlight come from time to time.
人的无定律的一切情感，优断优续的仍然在我们中间继续着生，仍然与我们共同交织着这生的纠纷，继续着生的理想。说起来，写诗的人的动机多么简单可怜，正是如你序里所说。
All human emotions without rules are still continuing to exist among us intermittently, still intertwining with us the disputes of this life, and continuing the ideal of life. It seems that the motivation of the person who wrote the poem is so simple and pitiful. It is exactly as you said in the preface.
我们都是受支配的善良的生灵。虽然有些诗人因为他们的成绩特别高厚广阔，包括了多数人或整个时代的艺术和思想的冲动，从此便在人中间披上神秘的光圈，使诗人。
We are all kind-hearted beings under the control of others. Although some poets have embraced the artistic and ideological impulses of most people or the entire era because their achievements are particularly high and broad, they have since cast a mysterious halo among people, making poet. We are all kind-hearted beings under the control of others. Although some poets have embraced the artistic and ideological impulses of most people or the entire era because their achievements are particularly high and broad, they have since cast a mysterious halo among people, making poet.
两字无形中挂着崇高的色彩，这样使一般努力于用韵文表现或描画人在自然万物相交错的情绪思想的，便被人的成见看作夸大狂的旗帜，需要同时代人的极冷酷的积善和不信任来扑灭它。
These 2 words have a sublime color to them. In this way, those who strive to use verse to express or describe the intertwined emotions and thoughts of people and nature are regarded as flags of exaggeration by human prejudices and need to be extinguished by the extremely cold ridicule and distrust of contemporaries.
以挽救人类的尊严和健康。说到你的诗，朋友，我正要正经地同你再说一些话，你不要不耐烦，这话迟早我们总要说清的。至于你诗的技巧问题，艺术上的造诣。
To save human dignity and health. Speaking of your poems, my friend, I am just about to say something more serious to you. Don't be impatient, we will have to make this clear sooner or later. As for the technical issues of your poems, your artistic attainments.
在这新诗仍在彷徨歧路的尝试期间，谁也不能坚决地论断。不过有一桩事，我很想提醒现在讨论新诗的人：新诗之由于无条件无形制宽泛到几乎没有一定的定义时代，转入这讨论外形内容。
While this new poetry is still trying to hesitantly, no one can make a firm conclusion, but there is one thing I would like to describe to those who are discussing new poetry now. While this new poetry is still trying to hesitantly, no one can make a firm conclusion, but there is one thing I would like to describe to those who are discussing new poetry now. New poetry is so broad that it has almost no definite definition due to its unconditional and unstructured era. In this era, discuss appearance content.
以至于音节韵脚、章句、意象组织等艺术技巧问题的时期，即是根据着对这方面努力尝试过的那些诗，你的头2个诗集子就是供给这些讨论见解最多材料的根据。简单的说，朋友。
As a result, the period of artistic technical issues such as the organization of syllables, rhymes, chapters, images, etc. was based on those poems that had tried hard in this regard. Your first 2 poetry collections provided the basis for the most material for these discussions. Simply put, friends.
你这写诗的动机是坦白不由自主的，你写诗的态度是诚实、勇敢而倔强的。这在讨论你诗的时候，谁都先得明了的。现在你走了这些事，渐渐在人的记忆中模糊下来。
Your motivation for writing poetry is honest and involuntary, and your attitude towards writing poetry is honest, brave, and stubborn. When discussing your poems, everyone should understand this first. Now that you are gone, these things have gradually become blurred in people's memories.
你的诗和文也散漫在个小本集子里，压在有极新鲜的封皮的新书后面。谁说起你来，不是马马虎虎的承认你是过去中一个势力，就是拿能够挑剔看清你的诗为本事。散文人家很少提到，或许。
Your poems and essays are also scattered in various small collections, and they are buried in the back of new books with very fresh covers. When anyone talks about you, they either admit vaguely that you were a force in the past, or they look down upon you because they can be picky. Poetry is the skill, prose writers rarely mention it, maybe.
散文家没有诗人那么光荣，不值得注意。此时我却是完全的一个糊涂。习惯上我说，美装饰都像是造物的意志，归根都是运命。但我明知道美装饰都像有我们自己的影子在里面烙印着。
Essayists are not as glorious as poets and are not worthy of note. At this time, I was completely confused. I am accustomed to say that everything is like the will of creation and is ultimately fate, but we know that everything seems to have our own shadow imprinted in it.
我也知道每一个日子是多少机缘巧合凑拢来拼成的图案，但我也疑问其间的排布谁是主宰。此刻我几乎找不出一句话来说，因为真的，我只是个完全的糊涂，感到生和死一样的不可解、不可懂。
I also know that every day is a pattern made up of many chances and coincidences, but I also wonder who is in charge of the arrangement. I can hardly find a word to say at this moment, because, really, I am just completely confused. I feel that life is as incomprehensible as death.
朋友，这是没法子的事，我却一点不为此灰心，因为我有我的信仰。朋友，我知道你从不介意过这些，许多人的浅陋老实或刻薄处，你早就领略过一堆，你不止未曾生过气。
Friends, there is nothing we can do about it, but I am not discouraged at all because I have my faith. My friend, I know you have never cared about this. You have experienced a lot of people's shallow honesty or meanness, and you have never been angry.
并且常常表示怜悯同原谅，你的心情永远是那么洁净，头老抬得那么高，胸中老是那么完整的诚挚，臂上老有那么许多不折不挠的勇气。朋友，你自己说，如果是你现在坐在我这位子上。
And you always express mercy and forgiveness. Your mood is always so pure. Your head is always raised so high. Your heart is always so complete sincerity. Your arms always have so much indomitable courage. Friend, you say it yourself, if you were sitting in my position now.
迎着这一窗太阳，眼看着菊花影在墙上描画作态，手臂下倚着2叠今早的报纸，耳朵里不时隐隐地听着朝阳门外打靶的枪弹声，意识的、潜意识的，要明白这生和死的谜，你又该写成怎样一首诗来？
Facing the sun in this window, watching the shadows of chrysanthemums depicting patterns on the wall, leaning on 2 stacks of this morning's newspapers under my arms, hearing the faint sound of target shooting bullets outside Chaoyang Gate from time to time, consciously and subconsciously, to understand the mystery of life and death, What kind of poem should you write?
纪念一个死别的朋友。据我看来，死是悲剧的一章，生则更是一场悲剧的主干。我们这一群剧中的角色自身性格与性格矛盾，理智与情感两不相容，理想与现实当面冲突，侧面或反面继承悲哀。
In memory of a deceased friend? In memory of a deceased friend? According to my opinion, death is a chapter of tragedy, and life is the backbone of a tragedy. The characters in our group of dramas have contradictory personalities, reason and emotion are incompatible, ideals and reality collide face to face, causing sadness from one side or the other.
日子一天一天向前转，昨日和昨日堆垒起来，混成一片不可避脱的背景，做成我们周遭的墙壁或气晕，那么结实又那么飘渺，使我们每一个人站在每一天的每一个时候里都是那么主要。
The days move forward day by day. Yesterdays and yesterdays pile up and blend into an unavoidable background, making the walls or air around us so solid and so ethereal, making each of us stand at every moment of every day. Everything here is so important.
又是那么渺小无能为。我还记得你要印诗集子时，我替你捏一把汗，老实说，还替你在有文采的老前辈中间难为情过。我也记得我初听到人家找你办晨报副刊时，我的焦急。
So insignificant and incompetent again. I still remember that when you wanted to publish a collection of poems, I felt a lot of sweat for you. To be honest, I felt embarrassed for you among the literary seniors. I also remember that when I first heard that you were approached to run the Morning Post supplement, I have anxiety.
但你居然板起个脸，抓起2把鼓锤子，为文艺吹打开路，乃至于扫地、铺鲜花，不顾旧势力的非难、新势力的怀疑。你干你的事事在人为，做了再说，那股子劲，以后别处也还很少见。
But you actually put on a straight face and grabbed 2 drumsticks to open the way for literature and art, even sweeping the floor and spreading flowers. You ignored the criticism of the old forces and the suspicion of the new forces. Gene, it will be rare elsewhere in the future.
我认为我们这写诗的动机，既如前边所说那么简单愚诚，因在某一时或某一刻敏锐地接触到生活上的锋芒，或偶然地触遇到理想峰巅上云彩星霞，不由得不在我们所习惯的语言中。
I think our motivation for writing poetry is as simple and sincere as mentioned before, because at a certain time or moment, we are keenly exposed to the edge of life, or accidentally encounter the clouds and stars on the peak of ideals, we can't help but feel, in the language we are used to.
编缀出1、2串近于音乐的句子来，慰藉自己，解放自己，去追求超实际的真美。读诗者的反应一定有一大半也和我们这写诗的一样诚实天真，仅想在我们句子中间有音乐性的愉悦。
We compose 1 or 2 strings of sentences that are close to music to comfort ourselves, liberate ourselves, and pursue the surreal beauty. We compose 1 or 2 strings of sentences that are close to music to comfort ourselves, liberate ourselves, and pursue the surreal beauty. Most of the readers of poetry must have the same honest and naive reactions as us who write poems. They just want to express themselves in our sentences. In the middle is the joy of music.
接触到一些生活的底蕴，渗合着美丽的憧憬，把我们的情绪给他们的情绪搭起一座浮桥，把我们的灵感给他们生活添些新鲜，把我们的痛苦伤心再揉成他们自己忧郁的安慰。
Come into contact with some of the details of life mixed with beautiful longings. Build a floating bridge with our emotions for their emotions. Add some freshness to their lives with our inspiration. Knead our pain and sorrow into their own melancholy comfort.
我看一个人一生为着一个愚诚的倾向，把所感受到的复杂的情绪、尝味道的生活，放到自己的理想和信仰的锅炉里，烧炼成几句悠扬铿锵的语言，哪怕是几声小唱。
I see a person living his life for a foolish and sincere tendency, putting the complex emotions he has experienced into the boiler of his own ideals and beliefs and burning them into a few melodious and sonorous words, even if it is sing a few times.
来满足他自己本能的艺术的冲动，这本来是个极寻常的事，哪一个地方哪一个时代都不断有这种人。闻着做这种人的，多半是为着他情感来的比寻常人浓富敏锐。
To satisfy his own instinctive artistic impulse, this is a very common thing. There are always such people in every place and in every era. Most people who take turns to be this kind of person are because their emotions are richer and more sensitive than ordinary people.
而为着这情感而发生的冲动，更是非实际的，或不全是实际的追求，而需要那种艺术的满足而已。我承认写诗是惨淡经营，孤立在人中挣扎的勾当。但是因为我知道太清楚了。
And the impulse for this emotion is even more unrealistic, or not entirely practical, pursuit. It just needs the satisfaction of that kind of art. I admit that writing poetry is a bleak business, an activity that is isolated and struggling among people, but because I know it too clearly.
你在这上面单纯的信仰和诚恳的尝试，为同业者奋斗，维护他们情感的愚诚，称扬他们艺术的创造，自己从未曾求过虚荣。我觉得你始终是很逍遥舒畅的。我们的作品会不会长存下去？
With your simple beliefs and sincere attempts, you have fought for your peers, protected their emotional honesty, and praised their artistic creations. You have never sought vanity. I think you have always been very carefree and comfortable. Will our works last forever?
也就看他们会不会活在那一些我们从不认识的人，我们作品的读者，散在各时各处互相不认识的孤单的人的心里的。这种事他自己有自己的定律，并不需要我们的关心的。你的诗句我所知道的。
It also depends on whether they will live in the hearts of people we have never known, readers of our works, lonely people scattered at all times and places who do not know each other. This kind of thing has its own laws. It doesn't require our concern. Your poems are as far as I know.
他们仍旧在这里浮沉流落，你的影子也就浓淡参差地记在那些诗句中，另一端印在许多不相识人的心里。朋友，你不要过于看清这种间接的生存，许多热情的人他们会为着你的存在。
They are still floating around here, and your shadow is tied to those poems in varying shades, and the other end is imprinted in the hearts of many strangers. Friends, don't underestimate this kind of indirect existence. There are many enthusiastic people who will exist for you.
而加增了生的意识的，伤心的仅是那些你最亲热的朋友们和同兴趣的努力者，你不在他们中间的事实，将要永远是个不能填补的空虚。就在那时候，我记得火车慢慢地由站台拖出。
And it increases the awareness of life. What makes you sad is only your closest friends and those who work with the same interests. The fact that you are not among them will always be an emptiness that cannot be filled. It was then that I remember the train being slowly pulled out of the platform.
一程一程的前进，我也随着酸创的诗意，那车的呻吟，过荒野，过池塘，过进口的村庄，到了第二站，我的一半家乡。如果那时候我的眼泪曾不自主地溢出节外，我知道你定会原谅我的。
As I progressed step by step, I also followed the sour poetry, the moan of the car, passing the wilderness, crossing the pond, passing the silent village. Arrived at the second stop half of my hometown. If my tears had involuntarily overflowed from my eyelashes at that time, I know you would forgive me.
你应当相信，我不会向悲哀投降。什么时候我都相信，倔强的终于生的，即使人生如你底下所说，就凭那精窄的两道，算是鬼，驮着这份重梦一般的累赘。如你自己所说，满头血水，你仍不曾低头。
You should believe that I will not surrender to sorrow. I will always believe in being stubborn and loyal to life, even if life is like what you said below. You should believe that I will not surrender to sorrow. I will always believe in being stubborn and loyal to life, even if life is like what you said below. Just those two narrow lanes are regarded as rails. Carrying this weight, I feel as tired as a dream. As you said yourself, your head is full of blood, but you still never bowed your head.
你自己相信一点性灵还在那里挣扎，还想在实际生活的重重压迫下透出一些声响来。外国的土话说，马总得放在马车的前面，不是？没有一些尝试的成绩放在那里。
You yourself believe that, a little bit of your soul is still struggling there, and you still want to make some noise under the heavy oppression of real life. As the foreign saying goes, the horse must be put in front of the carriage, isn't it? There are no results for some attempts put there.
理论家是不能老在那里发一堆空头支票的，不是？你自己一向不止在那里倔强的尝试用功，你还曾用尽你所有活泼的热心，鼓励别人尝试，鼓励时代起来尝试。这种工作是最犯风头嫌疑的。
Theorists can't keep handing out a bunch of bad checks, can they? You yourself have not only been stubbornly trying to learn, but you have also used all your lively enthusiasm to encourage others to try and encourage the times to try. This kind of work is the most suspect of being in the limelight.
也只有你胆子大，头皮硬顶得下来。你并不离我们太远，你的身影永远挂在这里那里，同你生前一样的飘忽。爱在人家不经意时立止，带来勇气的笑声也总是那么嘹亮。还有
Only you who are brave enough can take it down. You are not far from us. Your figure will always hang here and there, as erratic as when you were alive. Love stops when others don't expect it. The laughter that brings courage is always so loud, and
还有经过你热情或交心苦吟的那些诗，一首一首仍串着许多人的心旋转。你在《猛虎集序》中说世界上再没有比写诗更惨的事，你却并未说明为什么写诗是一桩惨事。
There are also those poems that you chanted passionately or anxiously, one by one. They are still spinning in the hearts of many people. You said in the preface to Tiger Collection that there is nothing worse in the world than writing poetry, but you did not explain why writing poetry is such a tragic thing.
现在让我来个注脚好不好？但是现在的情形与以前却稍稍不同。你自己既已不在这里，做你朋友的，眼看着你被误解、曲解，乃至于谩骂，有时真忍不住替你不平。但是我却要告诉你。
Now let me make a footnote, okay? But the situation now is slightly different from before. Since you are no longer here, those who are your friends see you being misunderstood, and even abused, and sometimes I can't help but feel sorry for you. But I have to tell you.
虽然4年了你脱离去我们这共同活动的世界，本身停掉参加牵引式体变迁的主力，可是谁也不能否认，你仍立在我们烟涛渺茫的背景里，间接的是一种力量。
Although you have left our world of common activities for 4 years and have stopped being the main force in driving changes and events, no one can deny that you are still standing in our hazy background, indirectly serving as a force.
尤其是在文艺创造的努力和信仰方面，但是他们每人手里拿的都不像纯文艺的天平，有的喜欢你的为人，有的疑问你私人的道德，有的单单尊崇你诗中所表现的思想哲学。
Especially in terms of efforts and beliefs in literary and artistic creation. But what each of them holds in their hands is not like a purely literary scale. Some like you as a person, some question your private morality, some simply respect the thoughts and philosophy expressed in your poems.
有的仅喜爱那些软弱的细致的句子，有的每发议论必须牵涉到你的个人生活之合乎规矩方圆，或断言你是轻薄，或引证你是浮舌豪齿。但你可别误会我心眼窄，把不相干的看成重要。
Some only like those weak and detailed sentences, and some every comment must involve the compliance of your personal life, or assert that you are frivolous, or cite you as extravagant and extravagant. But don't misunderstand that I am narrow-minded and regard irrelevant things as important.
我也知道误解、曲解、谩骂都是不相干的，但是朋友，我们谁都需要有人了解我们的时候，真了解了我们，即使是痛下针砭，骂着了我们的弱处错处，那整个的我们却因而更增添了意义。
I also know that misunderstandings, misinterpretations, and insults are irrelevant, but friends, all of us need someone to understand us. When someone really understands us, even if it hurts and criticizes our weaknesses and mistakes, then the whole of us, but it adds even more meaning.
一个作家文艺的总成绩，更需要一种就文论文、就艺术论艺术的和平判断。今年又轮到今天这一个日子，世界仍旧一团糟，多少地方是黑云布满，粗着筋络往理想的反面猛进。我并不在瞎说。
A writer's overall achievement in literature and art requires a kind of peaceful judgment of essays on literature and art on art. This year it's today's turn again. The world is still in a mess, and in many places it is filled with dark clouds. I look forward to the opposite direction of ideals. I am not talking nonsense.
当我写信仰只一系炷香，那点子亮再经不起西风，沙沙地隔着梧桐树吹。人说盖棺定论，前者早似成了事实，这后者在这4年中说来叫人难受。我还未曾谈到一篇中肯或诚实的论评。
When I write, faith is only a thin stick of incense. That bright idea can no longer withstand the west wind. The rustling sound blew through the sycamore trees. People say that the final conclusion has been made, but the former has long been a fact. The latter has been painful to say in the past 4 years. I have yet to give a single pertinent or honest review.
虽然对你的赞美和攻讦由你去世后1-2周间就纷纷开始了，你走后，大家就提议要为你设立一个志摩奖金来继续你鼓励人家努力诗文的素质，勉强象征你那种对于文艺创造拥护的热心。
Although the praise and criticism of you started 1 or 2 weeks after your death. After you left, everyone proposed to set up a Shimo Prize for you to continue your ambition of encouraging others to work hard on poetry and prose, which barely symbolized your enthusiasm for supporting literary and artistic creation.
史不及认得你的青年人永远对你保存着亲热。如果这是你不觉到太寒碜不够热气，我希望你原谅你这些朋友们的苦心，在冥冥之中笑着给我们勇气来做这一些蠢诚的事吧。蛛丝和梅花。
So that young people who don't recognize you will always retain affection for you. If you don't feel that this matter is too cold and not hot enough, I hope you will forgive your friends for their hard work, smile in the dark and give us the courage to do these stupid things. Spider silk and plum blossoms.
真的就是那么2根蛛丝，由门框边轻轻地牵到一枝梅花上，就是那么2根细丝，迎着太阳光发亮。再多了，那还像样吗？一个摩登家庭如何能容蛛网在光天白日里作怪？管它有多美丽，多玄妙。
It's really just 2 spider threads that gently lead from the door frame to a plum blossom. Just 2 filaments, shining in the sunlight. If there were more, would they still be decent? How can a modern family allow a cobweb to cause trouble in broad daylight, no matter how beautiful and mysterious it is?
多细致，够你对着它联想到一切自然造物的神功和不可思议处。这2根丝本来就该使人脸红，且在冬天够多特别。可是亮亮的、细细的，倒有点像银，也有点像玻璃制的细丝，委实不算讨厌。
It's so delicate that you can think of everything, the miraculous craftsmanship and wonder of natural creation. These 2 threads should make people blush, and they are so special in winter. But it's bright and thin, a bit like silver, and a bit like glass filaments, so it's not really annoying.
尤其是它们那么消脱风雅，偏偏那样有意无意地斜着搭在梅花的枝梢上。你向着那厮看，冬天的太阳照满了屋内，窗明几净，每朵含苞的、开透的、半开的梅花在那里挺秀吐香。
Especially they are so elegant and graceful, and they are leaning on the branches of plum blossoms intentionally or unintentionally. You look at the window, the winter sun shines all over the house, the windows are bright and clean, and every plum blossom is in bud, fully open. Especially they are so elegant and graceful, and they are leaning on the branches of plum blossoms intentionally or unintentionally.
情绪不禁迷茫缥缈地冲溢心胸，在那刹那的时间中震荡。同蛛丝一样的细弱，何不必须？思想开始抛引出去，由过去迁到将来，意识的、非意识的，由门框梅花迁出宇宙，浮云苍波，踪迹不定。是人性一般。
Emotions can't help but fill my mind in a confused and ethereal way, oscillating in that moment of time. As thin and unnecessary as a spider's thread, thoughts began to be thrown out, from the past to the future, conscious and unconscious, from the plum blossoms on the doorframe to the universe, with uncertain traces of floating clouds and waves. It's human nature and art.
还是哲学，你也无暇计较，你不能制止你情绪的冲溢，思想的驰骋。蛛丝梅花竟然是瞬息可以千里，这不是初恋，是未恋，正自觉解看花艺的时代。情绪的不同，不只是男子和女子有分别。
It's still philosophy. You have no time to care about it. You can't stop the overflowing of your emotions, the galloping of your thoughts. The spider's silk plum blossoms can travel thousands of miles in an instant. This is not the first love, but the new love, a time when we are consciously reading the meaning of flowers. It's still philosophy. You have no time to care about it. You can't stop the overflowing of your emotions, the galloping of your thoughts. The spider's silk plum blossoms can travel thousands of miles in an instant. This is not the first love, but the new love, a time when we are consciously reading the meaning of flowers. The difference in emotions is not limited to men and women.
东方和西方也甚有差异。情绪即使根本相同，情绪的象征、情绪所寄托、所期指的事物却常常不同。水和星子同西方情绪的联系早就成了习惯。一颗星子在蓝天里闪，一流冷箭倾泻一片忧愁的平静。
There are also great differences between the East and the West. Even if the emotions are basically the same, the symbols of the emotions, the things on which the emotions rest, and the things they rest on are often different. The connection between water and stars and Western emotions has long been a habit. A star twinkles in the blue sky, and a cold stream pours out a melancholy calm.
便激起他们诗情的波涌，心里甜蜜的、热情的便唱着由那些俄语的笔锋散下来的他的眼如同星子在暮天里闪，或是明丽如同单独的那颗星照着晚来的天，或多少次了，在一流碧水旁边。
It aroused the surge of poetry in them, and they sang sweetly and passionately in their hearts. Her eyes are like stars twinkling in the dusk sky, scattered by the pen edges of those goose feathers, or, bright as a single star, stars, shining in the late sky, or, how many times, beside the first flowing clear water.
忧愁以下他低垂的脸。西花、谢花太东方，亲昵自然，含着人性的细致，是东方传统的情绪。记起了，也就是说到梅花、玉兰。初时有个朋友说起初恋时，玉兰刚开完，天气每天的暖，住在湖旁。
Sorrow leans on her downcast face. Cherishing flowers, understanding flowers is too oriental, being intimate and natural, containing the delicacy of human nature is the traditional oriental emotion. Remember, that is to say, plum blossoms and magnolias. At first, there was a friend said that when I first fell in love, the magnolias had just finished blooming, the weather was getting warmer every day, and I lived by the lake.
每夜跑到湖边林子里走路，又静坐幽僻石上看隔岸灯火，感到好像仅有如此虔诚的孤对一片红碧寒星远视，才能把心里情绪抓紧了，放在最可靠最纯净的一撮思想里，使不致亵渎了或是惊着呢。
Every night I walked in the woods by the lake, and sat quietly on a secluded rock to watch the lights on the other side. I felt that only by being so devoutly facing the bright blue stars in the distant city could I relax my inner emotions and put them in the most reliable and pure place. In a group of thoughts, there is no blasphemy or surprise that.
寤寐思服的人儿，那是极年轻的男子初恋的情景，对象渺茫高远，反而尽求自我的郁结深浅。他问起少女的情绪。此外，年龄还有尺寸，一样是愁，却跃跃似喜。16岁时的威风凌乱，不颓废，不空虚。
It was the scene of a very young man's first love. The object was vague and lofty, but he pursued his self deeply. He asked about the girl's emotions. In addition, age and size. The same sadness, but leaping like joy. At the age of 16, the breeze was chaotic, not decadent, not empty.
踮着理想的脚，充满希望。东方和西方却一样，人老了默默烟雨，愁吟或牢骚，多折损似的活泼。大家如香山、贾轩、东坡，放翁的白发华发，很少不梗在诗里，至少是令人不快。话说远了，刚说是西化。
Standing on the feet of ideals, people are full of hope, but it is the same in the East and the West. When people get old, they often feel sad and complain, which damages the liveliness of poetry. People like Xiangshan, Zhishuan, Dongpa, Fang Weng's white hair and white hair rarely fail to stand out in poetry, or at least are unpleasant. That's a long way from saying it. I just said it was about cherishing flowers.
东方老少都免不了这嗜好，这倒不论老的血鬓业障，深闺里也就攒没千度。最叫人惜的花是海棠一类的春红，那样娇嫩明艳，开过了残红满地，太招惹同情和伤感。
Young and old in the East are all unavoidable in this hobby. It does not matter whether the old man drags his stick with snow on his temples. The most cherished flowers are the spring reds, such as crabapples. They are so delicate and bright, and they bloom all over the red ground, which arouses sympathy and sadness.
但在西方，即使也有我们同样的花，也还缺乏我们的朗舞庭院。有了庭院深几许，才有一种庭院里特有的情绪。如果李易安的斜风细雨底下，不是重门虚壁，也就不萧条的那样深沉可爱。
But even though we have the same flowers in the West, we still lack our verandas and courtyards. With How Deep is the Courtyard, there is a unique mood in the courtyard. If Li Ian's slanting wind and drizzle wasn't a heavy door must be closed underneath, it wouldn't be as deep and lovely as Depression.
以后主的终日谁来也一样的别有寂寞滋味。看花更需庭院，深锁在里面认识，不时还得有轩窗栏杆给你一点凭借，虽然也用不着12栏杆以便那么庸弱无聊。拿梅花来说吧。
Li Hoju's, who will come all day, also has a unique feeling of loneliness. To see the flowers, you need to be in the courtyard, and you are deeply locked in the understanding. From time to time, there are window railings to give you a little support, although there is no need to lean on the 12 railings, which is so weak and boring. Let's take plum blossoms as an example.
一串串丹红的结蕊坠在秀静的傲骨上，最可爱，最可赏。等半绽将开的错落在老枝上时，你便会心跳。梅花最怕开，开了便没话说。索性残了，沁香拂散，同夜里炉火都能成了一种温存的凄清。
Strings of bright red stamens are decorated on the elegant and proud bones. They are the cutest and most admirable. When the half-flowered stamens are scattered on the old branches, your heart will beat. The plum blossoms are most afraid of blooming. When they bloom, there will be nothing to say. Strings of bright red stamens are decorated on the elegant and proud bones. They are the cutest and most admirable. When the half-flowered stamens are scattered on the old branches, your heart will beat. The plum blossoms are most afraid of blooming. When they bloom, there will be nothing to say. Simply disabled, the scent of the fragrance spreads and the fire in the night becomes a kind of gentle desolation.
所以未恋时的对象最自然的是花，不是因为花而起的感慨。16岁时无所谓感慨，仅是刚说过的自觉解花的情绪寄托在那清丽无语的上边。你心着它绝韵孤高，你为花动了感情。
Therefore, when you are not in love, the most natural object is flowers. It is not the emotion that arises because of flowers. There is no emotion at the age of 16. It is just the emotion of conscious interpretation of flowers that I just mentioned, which is placed on that beautiful and speechless thing. Your heart is broken by its unique charm and aloofness, and you are moved by the flower.
实说你同花恋爱也未尝不可，那惊讶狂喜也不减于初恋，还有那凝望，那沉思。当然，旧诗里伤愁太多，一首诗竟像一张美的证券，可以照着市价去兑现。所以庭花、乱红、黄昏、寂寞太烂，诗常失却诚实。
To be honest, it's not a bad thing if you fall in love with the same flower. The surprise and ecstasy will not be less than that of first love. And that gaze, that contemplation. Of course, there is too much sadness in old poetry. A poem is like a beautiful security that can be cashed in according to the market price. Therefore, the flowers in the garden are red in disorder, dusk and loneliness are too much, and the poems often lose their honesty.
西洋诗，恋爱总站在前头，或是忘掉，或是记起，月是为爱，花也是为爱，即使全是真情，也未尝不太腻味。就以两边好的来讲，拿他们的月光同我们的月色比，似乎是月色滋味深长得多。花更不用说了。
In Western poetry, love always stands in the front, either forgetting or remembering. The moon is for love, and the flowers are also for love. As long as it is all true love, it is not too boring. Let's talk about the good things on both sides. Comparing their moonlight with our moonlight, it seems that the moonlight is much more profound. Not to mention flowers.
我们的花不是预备采下缀成花球或花冠献给恋人的，却是一束一束绰约的、个性的，自己立在情人的地位上接受恋歌的。就在这里，忽记起梅花，一枝两枝，老枝细枝，横着、求着、描着影子，喷着细香。
Our flowers are not ready to be picked and decorated into bouquets or corollas to present to lovers. Instead, they are graceful and individual, standing in the position of lovers and accepting love songs. Right here, I suddenly remembered plum blossoms. One or two branches, old branches and thin branches, lying horizontally, curling, tracing shadows, and spraying fine fragrance.
太阳淡淡金色地铺在地板上，四壁琳琅，书架上的书和书签都像在发出言语，墙上小对联记不的是谁的集句，中条是东坡的诗。 你敛住气，简直不敢喘息，踮起脚，细小的身形嵌在书房中间。
The sun spreads on the floor with a faint golden color, the walls are decorated with flowers, and the books and bookmarks on the bookshelf seem to be speaking out. The small couplets on the wall are from which I can't remember whose poems. The middle section is a poem by Dongpa. You held your breath, barely daring to breathe, raised your feet, and your small figure was embedded in the middle of the study.
看残照当窗，花影摇曳，你像失落了什么，有点迷惘，又像怪东风着意相寻，有点没主意。浪漫，极端的浪漫，飞花满地谁为扫？你问，情绪风似的吹动，卷过，停留在西花上面。再回头看看，花依旧嫣然不语。
Looking at the afterglow through the window and the swaying shadows of the flowers, you feel like you have lost something and are a little confused. It's strange that Dongfang is looking for someone with intention, which is a bit out of ideas. Romance, extreme romance. Looking at the afterglow through the window and the swaying shadows of the flowers, you feel like you have lost something and are a little confused. It's strange that Dongfang is looking for someone with intention, which is a bit out of ideas.
如此娉婷，谁人解看花意？你更沉默，几乎热情地感到花的寂寞，开始怜花，把同情统统失意地交给了花心。好比你是蜘蛛，你的周围也有你自知的蛛网，细致地牵引着天地。
Such a beautiful girl, who can understand the meaning of the flower. You become even more silent, feeling the loneliness of the flower almost passionately, and begin to pity the flower, giving all your sympathy to the flower's heart poetically. It's like you are a spider, and there are also flowers around you. Such a beautiful girl, who can understand the meaning of the flower. You become even more silent, feeling the loneliness of the flower almost passionately, and begin to pity the flower, giving all your sympathy to the flower's heart poetically. It's like you are a spider, and there are also flowers around you. The spider web you weave yourself draws the heaven and earth meticulously.
不怕多少次风雨来吹断它，你不会停止了这生命上基本的活动。此刻，一枝写好，幽香不知甚处。一根蛛丝，记忆也同一根蛛丝，搭在梅花上，就由梅花枝上牵引出去，虽未织成密网，这诗意的前后。
No matter how many times the wind and rain blow it off, you will not stop this basic activity in life. At this moment, a branch is tilted, but the fragrance is unknown. A spider's thread. Memory is also the same spider thread. It is pulled out from the plum blossom branches after being hooked on the plum blossom. Although it has not been woven into a dense web, this poetic front and back.
也就是相隔10几年的情绪的联络。午后的阳光仍然斜照，庭院去然，离离疏影，房里窗棂和梅花依然半合成为图案。两根蛛丝在冬天还可以算为奇迹，你望着它看，真有点像银，也有点像玻璃。
That is, the emotional connection that took place more than 10 years apart. The afternoon sun still shines slantingly, the courtyard is quiet, with few shadows. The window lattice and plum blossoms in the room still form a pattern together. The two spider silks can still be regarded as a miracle in winter. When you look at them, they look a bit like silver. It's also a bit like glass.
偏偏那么斜挂在梅花的枝梢上。25年新年漫记，文艺丛刊小说选题季，大公报文艺副刊出了1年多，现在要将这第1年中属于创造的短篇小说提出来，选出若干篇。
It just hangs so obliquely on the branches of plum blossoms. 25 New Year's Notes. Notes on selecting topics for novels in literary and art series. Takung Pao Literary Supplement has been published for more than a year, and now I want to present the short stories that were created in this first year and select a few.
印成单行本供给读者更方便的阅览，这个工作的确该使认真的作者和读者两方面全都高兴。这里篇数并不多，人数也不多，但是聚在一个小小的选集里也还结实饱满。
Printed in a single volume to provide readers with more convenient reading. This work should indeed please both the serious writer and the reader. There are not many articles here, and the number of people is not large, but gathered together in a small anthology, it is still solid and full.
拿到手里可以使人充满喜悦的希望。除却上面对题材的偏向以外，创造文艺的认真却是毫无疑问的。前一时代在流畅文字的烟幕下，刻薄的以讽刺个人博取流行幽默的小说。
Holding it in your hands can fill you with joyful hope. Apart from the above-mentioned preference for subject matter, there is no doubt about the seriousness of creating literature and art. Holding it in your hands can fill you with joyful hope. Apart from the above-mentioned preference for subject matter, there is no doubt about the seriousness of creating literature and art.
现已无形地并出努力创造者的门外，衰灭下去机智绝境。这个情形实在也值得我们作者和读者额手相庆的好现象。通篇的连贯，文字的经济，着重点的安排，颜色图画的鲜明。
Now it has been invisibly kicked out of the door of those who worked hard to create it, and it is declining and almost extinct. This situation is indeed a good phenomenon worthy of congratulations from us authors and readers. The coherence of the whole text, the economy of words, the arrangement of key points, and the vividness of colors and pictures.
已成为极寻常的标准。 在个篇中，我们相信读者一定还不会不觉察到那些好处的，为着那些地方就给了编选人以不少愉快和希望。这种创造既浪费文字来夸张虚伪的情景和伤感
has become a very common standard. In each article, we believe that readers will not fail to notice the benefits, and these places give the editors a lot of happiness and hope. This kind of creation is a waste of words to exaggerate hypocritical situations and sadness.
那些认真的读者要从文艺里充实生活、认识人生的，自然要感到十分的不耐烦和失望的。这倾向并不偶然，说好一点，是我们这个时代对于他们农人与劳力者有浓重的同情和关心；说坏一点，
Those serious readers who want to enrich their lives and understand life through literature and art will naturally feel very impatient and disappointed. This tendency is not accidental. To say the best, it is because our era has strong sympathy and concern for them, farmers and laborers. To say the worst,
是一种盲从驱使的现象。但最公平地说，还是上面的两个原因都有一点关系。描写劳工社会、乡村色彩已成一种风气，且在文艺界也已有一点成绩。出奇的作家或个性不强烈的作家。
It is a phenomenon of blindly following trends. But the fairest thing to say is that the above two reasons are somewhat related. When describing labor society, rural color has become a trend, and it has also achieved some success in the literary and art circles. A beginning writer, or a writer with a weak personality,
就容易不自觉地因袭种种已有眉目的格调下笔。许多人因是自救生活方式不新鲜，而故意地选择了一些特殊浪漫，而自己并不熟识的生活来做题材。
It is easy to unconsciously follow various existing styles and write. Many people feel guilty that their lifestyle is not new, so they deliberately choose some special romantic themes that they are not familiar with.
然后敲诈自己有限的幻想力，去铺张出自己所没有的情感，来骗取读者的同情。至于关于这里短篇技巧的水准、平均的程度，编选人却要不避嫌疑地提出，请读者注意。无疑的，在结构上，在描写上。
Then he blackmails his limited imagination to show off emotions he doesn't have, and deceives readers' sympathy. As for the technical level and averageness of the short stories here, the editor and selector would like to ask readers to pay attention without hesitation. Undoubtedly, in terms of structure and description.
在叙事与对话的分配上，多数作者已有很成熟自然的运用。声色幼稚和冗长散漫的作品，在新文艺早期中毫无愧色地散见于各种印刷物中，现在已完全敛迹。
In the distribution of narrative and dialogue, most authors have used it very maturely and naturally. Jerky, childish, lengthy, and rambling works, which were unashamedly scattered in various printed matter in the early days of the new literature and art, have now completely disappeared.
生活的丰富不在生存方式的种类多与少，如做过学徒，又拉过洋车，去过甘肃，又走过云南，却在客观的观察力与主观的感觉力同时的锐利敏捷，能多面地明了及肠胃所见、所听、所遇。
The richness of life does not lie in the variety of ways of living. For example, I have been an apprentice, pulled a foreign truck, been to Gansu and Yunnan, but my objective observation and subjective perception are sharp and agile at the same time, and I can understand in many aspects. And taste what you see, hear, and encounter.
种种不同的情景，还得理会到人在生活上互相的关系与牵连，固定的与偶然的中间所起戏剧式的变化，最后更得有自己特殊的看法及思想、信仰或哲学。
A variety of different situations, you have to understand the relationship and involvement of people in life, the dramatic changes between fixed and accidental, and finally, you have to have your own special views and thoughts, beliefs, or philosophies.
现在姑且以编选人对这多篇作品所得的感想来说，供读者浏览评阅这本选集时一种参考，简单的就是底下的一点意见。最后，如果不算离题太远。
Now let's take the editor's reflections on these many works as a reference for readers when browsing and reviewing this anthology. It is simply a few comments below. In the end, if it's not too far off topic.
我们还要具体的讲一点我们对于作者与作品的见解。所谓诚实，并不是作者必须实际的经过在作品中所提到的生活，而是凡在作品中所提到的生活，的确都是作者在理智上所极明了。
We also want to talk more specifically about our views on the author and the work. The so-called honesty does not mean that the author must actually experience the life mentioned in the work, but that all the lives mentioned in the work are indeed understood by the author intellectually.
在感情上极能体验得出的情景或人性。所以一个作者在运用文字的技术学问外，必须是能力在任何生活上面，能在主观与客观之间，感觉和了解之间，理智上进退有余，情感上横溢奔放。
Situations or human nature that can be experienced emotionally. Therefore, in addition to the technical knowledge of using words, an author must be able to stand on any life, be able to advance and retreat intellectually between subjectivity and objectivity, between feeling and understanding, and be emotionally unrestrained.
记忆与幻想交错相符，到了真即是假，假即是真的程度，他的笔下才现着活力真诚。 他的作品才会充实伟大，不受题材或文字的影响，而能持久普遍的动人。
Memory and fantasy are intertwined and complementary, to the extent that truth is false and false is true, and only then is there vitality and sincerity in his writing. Only then will his works be substantial and great, unaffected by subject matter or words, and able to be lasting and universally moving.
我们希望选集在这一点上可以显露出这种创造力的缺乏或艺术性的不纯真，刺激作家们自己更有个性、更热诚地来刻画这多面错综复杂的人生，不拘泥于任何一个角度。
We hope that the anthology can reveal this lack of creativity or artistic impurity at this point, and stimulate the writers themselves to be more individual and more enthusiastic in depicting this multifaceted and complicated life, without being limited to any one angle.
我们不怕读者读过了以后，炙燃起的希望或者又会按下变成失望，因为这失望竟许是不可免的。如果读者对创造界诚恳地抱着很大的理想，心里早就叠着不平常的期望。
We are not afraid that after reading this book, the hopes raised may turn into disappointment. Because this disappointment may be unavoidable. If the reader sincerely holds great ideals about the world of creation, he will already have extraordinary hopes in his heart.
尤其是在我们这时代，青年作家都很难过自己在物质上享用，优越于一般少受教育的民众，便很自然地要认识乡村的穷苦，对偏僻的内地发生兴趣，反倒撇开自己所熟识的生活不写。
Especially in our era, young writers are very sad that they are enjoying material advantages and are superior to the less educated people, so they naturally want to understand the poverty in the countryside and become interested in the remote hinterland. Instead, they put aside the things they are familiar with. Life is not written.
拿单篇来讲，许多都写得好，还有些特别写得精彩的。但以创造界全盘试验来看，这种偏向表示贫弱，缺乏创造力量，并且为良心的动机而写作，那作品的艺术成分便会发生疑问。
Taking individual articles as an example, many are well written, and some are particularly brilliant. However, judging from the overall experience in the creative world, this tendency indicates weakness and lack of creative power. And if you write for conscience reasons, the artistic content of the work will be questioned.
如果我们取鸟瞰的形式来观察这个小小的局面，至少有一个最显著的现象展在我们眼下。在这些作品中，在题材的选择上似乎有个很偏的倾向。
If we look at this small situation from a bird's eye view, at least one of the most remarkable phenomena is unfolding before our eyes. If we look at this small situation from a bird's eye view, at least one of the most remarkable phenomena is unfolding before our eyes. Among these works, there seems to be a very biased tendency in the choice of subject matter.
那就是趋向农村或少受教育分子或劳力者的生活描写。在描写上，我们感到大多数所取的方式是写一段故事，或以一两人物为中心，或以某地方一桩事发生的始末为主干，单纯的发展与结束。
That is the description of the life of rural or less educated people or laborers. In terms of description, we feel that most of the methods used are to write a story, either with one or two characters as the center, or with the beginning and end of an incident in a certain place as the main body, with simple development and ending.
这也是比较薄弱的手法。这个我们疑惑，或是许多作者误会了短篇的限制，把它的可能性看得过窄的缘故。生活大胆的断面，这里少有人尝试剖析贴己生活的矛盾，也无多少人认真的来做。
This is also a relatively weak approach. We suspect that this may be because many authors misunderstand the limitations of the short story and view its possibilities too narrowly. Few people try to take a bold cross-section of life, and few people do it seriously to reveal the contradictions of personal life.
这也是我们中间一种遗憾。作品最主要处事诚实，诚实的重要还在题材的新鲜、结构的完整、文字的流利之上。即是作品需诚实于作者客观所明了、主观所体验的生活。
This is also a regret among us. The most important thing about the work is honesty. The importance of honesty lies in the freshness of the subject matter, the integrity of the structure, and the fluency of the writing. That is, the work must be honest to the author's objective understanding and subjective experience of life.
小说的情景即使整个是虚构的，内容的情感却全得借力于破真的、体验过的情感，毫不能用空洞虚假来支持这伤感的情节。但只要是读者诚实的反应，我们都不害怕。
Even if the scenes in the novel are entirely fictitious, the emotions in the content must all be based on real and experienced emotions, and empty falsehoods must not be used to support the sad plot. Even if the scenes in the novel are entirely fictitious, the emotions in the content must all be based on real and experienced emotions, and empty falsehoods must not be used to support the sad plot. But as long as it's honest reactions from readers, we're not afraid.
因为这里是一堆作者老实的成绩合起来代表一年中创造界一部分的试验，无论拿什么标准来衡量它、断定它的成功或失败，谁也没有一句话说的。一个生活丰富者不再客观地见过若干事物。
Because here are a bunch of honest achievements by the author, which together represent a year of experiments in the creative world. No matter what standards are used to measure it and judge its success or failure, no one can say a word. A person who lives a rich life has no longer objectively seen several things.
而在能主观的能激发很复杂、很不同的情感和能够同情于人性的许多方面的人，这些道理，读者比作者当然还要明白点，所以作品的估价永远操在认真的读者手里。
And in people who can subjectively inspire very complex and very different emotions, and who can sympathize with many aspects of human nature. And in people who can subjectively inspire very complex and very different emotions, and who can sympathize with many aspects of human nature. Of course, readers understand these principles better than authors, so the valuation of works is always in the hands of serious readers.
这也是这个选集不得不印书献与他的公正的评判者的一个原因。究竟怎么一回事？写诗究竟是怎么一回事？写诗或可说是要抓紧一种一时闪动的力量，一面跟着潜意识浮沉。
This is one of the reasons why this anthology has to be printed and dedicated to its impartial judges. What on earth happened? What is writing poetry all about? Writing poetry can be said to be about grasping a momentary flash of power while following the ups and downs of the subconscious mind.
摸索自己内心所萦回、所着重的情感，喜悦、哀思、幽怨、恋情，或深、或浅、或缠绵、或热烈；又一方面，顺着直觉、认识、辨位，在眼前或记忆里观感所出遇的意象、颜色、形体、声音、动静，或细致，或亲切，或雄伟。
Explore the lingering and focused emotions in your heart: joy, sorrow, love, whether they are deep or shallow, lingering or passionate. On the other hand, you can follow your intuition, recognize and discern the taste in front of you or in your memory. The images encountered by the senses, colors, shapes, sounds, movements, may be delicate, intimate, or majestic.
或诡异，在一方面又追着理智探讨、剖析、理会这些不同的性质、不同分量、流转不定的情感意象所互相融汇、交错策动而发生的感念，然后以语言文字运用其声音意义、经营、描画，表达这内心意象。
Or strange, on the other hand, we pursue rational exploration, analysis, and understanding of the emotions generated by the fusion and interweaving of these different natures, different weights, and uncertain emotional images, and then use language and words, using their sound meanings, to manage, describe, and express this inner image.
情绪理解在同时间或不同时间里适应或矛盾的所共起的波澜，这感悟情绪的闪动、灵感的脚步来的侵蚀，好比潺潺清水婉转流畅，自然的洗涤，浸润一切事物情感，倒影映月，梦残歌罢。
Emotions, understanding the waves of adaptation or contradiction at the same time, or emotions, understanding the waves of adaptation or contradiction at the same time or at different times. This flash of sentiment, the step of inspiration, comes lightly, just like the gentle and smooth gurgling water, washing naturally, infiltrating the emotions of everything, reflecting the moon, and singing after a dream.
美感的旋起一种超实际的权衡轻重，可书成慷慨缠绵千行的长歌，可留下如幽夜微叹般的三两句诗词。愉悦的心声，清灵的心话，常如啼鸟落花，清风满月，夹杂着情绪的缤纷，泪痕巧笑，奔放轻盈。
The sense of beauty stirs up a kind of unrealistic waiting, which can be expressed into a long song with 1,000 lines of generous and lingering words, and can leave behind a few lines of poetry like a sigh. The joyful voice and the light pictures in the heart are often like birds singing and falling flowers. The breeze is full of the moon, mixed with the colorful emotions, tears stained by laughter, unrestrained and light.
若有意若无意地遗留在各种言语文字上，这一闪感悟，或是混沌朦胧，或是透彻明晰，像光同时能照耀洞察，又能揣摩包含你的所有已经肠胃、还在肠胃及幻想肠胃的生的种种形色质量。
Whether intentionally or unintentionally, it is left in various words and texts. This flash of realization may be chaotic and hazy, or it may be transparent and clear. Like light, it can illuminate insights at the same time, and it can also comprehend whether intentionally or unintentionally, it is left in various words and texts. This flash of realization may be chaotic and hazy, or it may be transparent and clear. Like light, it can illuminate insights at the same time, and it can also comprehend the various qualities of life that include all the tastes you have tasted, are still tasting, and the imaginary tastes.
且又活跃着其间错综重叠于人与我的意义。诗的泉源，上面已说过，是意识与潜意识的融汇、交流错综的情感意象和概念所促成。无疑的，诗的表现必是一种形象、情感、思想合一的语言。
And it also activates the intricate and overlapping meanings between people and me. The source of poetry, and it also activates the intricate and overlapping meanings between people and me. The source of poetry, as mentioned above, is the conscious and subconscious integration and exchange of intricate emotional images and concepts. Undoubtedly, the expression of poetry must be a language that integrates images, emotions, and thoughts.
诗之所以发生，就不叫它做灵感的来临，主要的意在那一闪力量突如其来，或灵异的一刹那的凑巧，将所有繁复的诗的因素都齐集荟萃于一额情偶然的时间里。所以，诗的创造或完成。
The reason why poetry happens is not to call it the coming of inspiration. The main thing is that the sudden flash of power or the coincidence of a magical moment brings all the complicated, poetic factors together in a moment of chance. Time. So the creation or completion of poetry.
主要意当在那灵异的、凑巧的、偶然的活动，一部分属意识，一部分属直觉，更多一部分属潜意识的所谓不以为而妙的妙。理智情感、明晰隐晦都不失之过偏，意象瑰丽迷离，转又朴实平淡。
The main reason should also be found in the supernatural, coincidental, and accidental activities that are partly conscious, partly intuitive, and partly subconscious. The so-called wonderful is wonderful without words. The main reason should also be found in the supernatural, coincidental, and accidental activities that are partly conscious, partly intuitive, and partly subconscious. The so-called wonderful is wonderful without words. Reason and emotion, both clear and obscure, are not too far away.
像是纷纷云云不知所从来，但飘忽中若有必然的元素可循，理解玄奥繁难；也像是纷纷云云莫名所以，但错杂里又是斑驳分明，情感穿插联系其中，若有若无，给草木气候，给热情颜色。
It's like people are confused about where they are coming from, but if there is a certain fate that can be found in the erratic situation, it is also like they are confused about why. But there are mottled and clear colors in the chaos, and emotions are interspersed and connected. The presence and absence of it give the vegetation climate and passion color.
无论什么诗，都从不会脱离过比喻象征或比喻象征式的言语。诗中意象多不是寻常纯客观的意象。诗中的云霞星宿、山川草木，常有人性的感情，同时内心人性的感触反又变成外界的体象。
No matter what poem, it is never separated from metaphors and symbols, or metaphorical and symbolic language. Many of the images in the poem are not ordinary purely objective images. The clouds, stars, mountains, rivers, and trees in the poem often have human feelings, and at the same time, the inner human feelings turn into external physical images.
虽简明浅现、隐奥繁复各有不同的，但是诗虽不能缺乏比喻象征，象征比喻却并不是诗。我们根本早得承认诗是不能脱离象征比喻而存在的。在诗里，情感必依附在意象上，求较具体的表现。
Although they are simple and superficial, they are all different from subtle and complex. But although poetry cannot lack metaphors and symbols, symbols and metaphors are not poetry. We have long ago admitted that poetry cannot exist without symbols and metaphors. In poetry, emotions must be attached to images and seek more concrete expression.
意象则必须明晰的或沉着的、恰适的烘托情感，表征含义。我们仅听到写诗人自己说一阵奇异的风吹过，或是一片澄清的月色，一个惊讶，一次心灵的震荡，便开始他写诗的尝试，迷于意境、文字。
The image must be clear or calm, appropriately highlight the emotion and represent the meaning. We only heard the poet himself say that a strange wind blew by, or a clear moonlight, a surprise, and vibration of the soul, and he began to try to write poetry, obsessed with artistic conception, words.
音乐的搏斗，但是究竟这灵异的风和月、心灵的震荡和惊讶是什么？是不是仍为那可以追踪到内心直觉的活动，到潜意识后面那综错交流的情感与意象，那意识上理智的感念思想？
The battle of music, but what is this supernatural wind and moon, the vibration and surprise of the soul? Is it still the activity that can be traced to inner intuition, to the intricately communicated emotions and images behind the subconscious, to the rational thoughts and feelings on the conscious level?
以及要求表现的本能冲动。灵异的风和月所指的当是外界的一种偶然现象，同时却也是指它们是内心活动的一种引火线。诗人说话没有不打比喻的。总而言之，天知道究竟写诗是怎么一回事。
And the instinctive urge to perform? And the instinctive urge to perform? The supernatural wind and moon should refer to an accidental phenomenon in the outside world, but at the same time they also mean that they are a kind of fuse for inner activities. The poet never speaks without metaphor. After all, God knows what writing poetry is all about.
在写诗的时候，或者是我知道，天知道，到写了之后，最好学 Browning 不必嫌疑的自激的，只承认天知道，天下关于写诗的笔墨官司便都省了。如果这还需要解释常识的，我们可以问
When writing a poem, it may be, I know, God knows. After writing it, it is best to imitate Browning's self-deprecation without avoiding suspicion, and just admit, God knows, and all the lawsuits about writing poetry will be saved. If this still needs explanation, common sense, we can ask.
在一个意识的或直觉的观感、情感、理智同时并重的一个时候，要一两句简约的话来代表一堆重叠交错的外象和内心情绪思想所发生的微妙的联系，而同时又不失去原来情感的质素分量。
At a time when consciousness, intuition, senses, emotion, and reason are all given equal importance at the same time, one or two concise sentences are needed to represent the subtle connections between a bunch of overlapping external images and inner emotions and thoughts, while at the same time without losing the original emotional quality. At a time when consciousness, intuition, senses, emotion, and reason are all given equal importance at the same time, one or two concise sentences are needed to represent the subtle connections between a bunch of overlapping external images and inner emotions and thoughts, while at the same time without losing the original emotional quality.
是不是容易或可能的是，在这一个凑巧的一顷刻小小时间中，着重于那凑巧的你的所有直觉、理智、观感、情感、记性和幻想，独立的及交互的，都蹦出它们不平常的锐敏、紧张、雄厚、壮阔及深沉。
Is it easy or possible? In this coincidental moment, emphasis on the coincidence, all your intuition, reason, senses, emotions, memories, and fantasies, independently and interactively, burst out with their unusual sharpness and intensity. Is it easy or possible? In this coincidental moment, emphasis on the coincidence, all your intuition, reason, senses, emotions, memories, and fantasies, independently and interactively, burst out with their unusual sharpness and intensity. Strong, magnificent, and deep.
在他们潜意识的流动、独立的或交互的融汇之间，如出偶然而又不可避免地涌上一闪感悟和情绪，或即所谓灵感，或是亲切的对自我得失悲欢，或辽阔的对宇宙自然，或智慧的对历史人性。
Between their subconscious flows, independent or interactive fusions, there emerge, accidentally but inevitably, flashes of insight, interest, or so-called inspiration, or an intimate sense of one's own joys and sorrows. Or the vast nature of the universe, or the wisdom of history and humanity.
因为相信诗是这样繁难的一列多方面条件的满足，我们不能不怀疑到纯净意识的、理智的，或可以说是技术的创造，或所谓公之绝无能为。写诗，或又可说是自己情感的。
Because we believe that poetry is the satisfaction of such a complex series of multifaceted conditions, we cannot help but doubt the inability of pure consciousness, rationality, or technical creation, or the so-called work. Writing poetry can be said to be about one's own emotions.
主观的所体验了解到的和理智的客观的所体察辨别到的，同时达到一个程度，腾飞横溢，不分宾主地，互相起了一种作用。由于本能的冲动，凭着一种天赋的兴趣和灵巧，驾驭一串有声音、有图画。
What is subjectively experienced and understood and what is rationally and objectively observed and discerned reach a level at the same time, overflowing, and play a role in each other regardless of host or guest, due to instinctive impulse and a kind of innate interest. And dexterity, control a string of sounds and pictures.
有情感的言语来表现之内心与外物息息相关的联系及其所发生的物理或境界。写诗，或又可说是经过若干潜意识的酝酿，突如其来的在生活中意识到那么凑巧的一顷刻小小时间，凑巧的。
Emotional words are used to express the close connection between the inner heart and external objects, as well as the resulting understanding or state. Writing poetry, or it can be said that after some subconscious brewing, suddenly realizing such a coincidental moment in life, coincidentally.
灵异的、不能自己的，流动着一片浓挚或深沉的情感，敛聚着重重繁复演变的情绪，更或凝定入一种单纯超卓的意境，而又本能地迫着你要刻画一种适合的表情。这表情积极的。
It is supernatural and cannot be your own, flowing with a strong or deep emotion, gathering complex and evolving emotions, or even condensing into a simple and outstanding artistic conception, and instinctively forcing you to depict a kind of artistic conception. Suitable expression. This expression is positive.
像要流泪叹息或歌唱欢呼、舞蹈演述，消极的又像要幽独静处、沉思自语。换句话说，这两者合一，便是一面要天真奔放、热情的自白，去邀同情和了解，同时又要寂寞沉默。
It's like crying and sighing, singing and cheering, dancing and performing, passively. It's like being in a quiet place, meditating to oneself. In other words, the combination of the two means being innocent and unrestrained, confessing passionately to invite sympathy and understanding, but at the same time being lonely and silent.
孤僻的自首来保持悠然自得的完美和严肃。写诗，或又可以说是若不知其所以然的、灵巧的、诚挚的，在传译给理想的同情者自己内心所流动的情感，穿过繁复的意象时。
Keep to yourself to maintain your leisurely perfection and seriousness. Writing poetry can be said to be deft and sincere without knowing why. When translating to the ideal sympathizer, the emotions flowing in one's heart pass through the complex images.
被理智所窥探而由直觉与意识分着汲取的福禄，一方面似是惨淡经营，至少是专程致意；一方面似是极力于平时不经意的准备，下笔有神的妙手偶然拈来，忠于情感，又忠于意象。
Talisman that is spied upon by reason and recorded separately by intuition and consciousness. On the one hand, it seems to be a bleak operation, at least it is a sincere tribute. On the other hand, it seems that the master of writing with spirit came by chance with the help of ordinary inadvertent preparations, loyal to emotion and loyal to image.
更忠于那一串刹那间内心整体闪动的感悟。写诗， 但这感悟情趣的闪动，若激越澎湃来的强时，可以如一片惊抛飞沙，由大处见到纤微，由细弱的物体看它变动，宇宙人生幻若苦迷。
More loyal to the series of feelings that flashed through my heart in an instant. Write poetry. However, if the flash of sentiment is strong and intense, it can be like a stormy sea with flying sand. It can be seen from the big and small, and it can be seen from the thin object to change. The universe and life can be like a puzzle.
一切又如经过烈火燃烧锤炼、分散、简化成为净纯的芒焰气质，生出所有情感意象与空幻、神秘、变异无定，或不减不变绝对、永恒的悬折境遇里去，卓越隐奥，与人性情理遥远的，好像隔成距离。
Everything is as if it has been tempered by burning fire, dispersed and reduced into a pure flame temperament, and all emotional images rise into the realm of fantasy, mystery, change and uncertainty, or remain unchanged, absolute and eternal. Extraordinary and mysterious, seemingly distant from human nature.
深受者或激昂通达，或禅寂淡远，将不免挣扎于超情感、超意象，乃至于超言语，以心传心的创造。隐晦迷离，如禅寂玄师，便不可制止地托生在与那幻想境界几不适宜的文字上，固定其生存权。
Those who experience it may be passionate and enlightened, or they may be peaceful and distant, and they will inevitably struggle with the creation of super emotions, super images, and even superverbal, heart-to-heart creations. Obscure and confusing, such as Zen verses and mysterious poems, they are inevitably reborn in words that are almost inappropriate for the fantasy realm, and their right to survival is assessed.
但是这种语言不能仅是语言，它又需是一种类似动作的表情，这种表情又不能只是表情，而需是一种理解概念的传达。它同时需不断传译情感，描写现象，诠释感悟。
But this kind of language cannot be just language, it must also be an expression similar to movements. This expression cannot be just an expression, but must be a communication of understanding concepts. At the same time, it must constantly translate emotions, describe phenomena, and interpret perceptions.
它不是形体，而需创造形体颜色；它是声音，却最多仅要留着长短节奏。最要紧的是按着急需高下和有限的铿锵音调，依附着一串单独或相连的字义上边。它需给直觉意识、情感理智以整体的快切。
It is not a body but needs to create body and color. It is a sound, but at most it only needs to maintain long and short rhythms. The most important thing is to follow the rapid high and low, and the limited sonorous tone, attached to a string of independent or connected word meanings. It must give intuitive consciousness, emotion and reason, and overall happiness.
一首好诗，在一个会心的读者前边，有时真会是一个奇迹。但是伤感流利、铺张的意象、图示的情感，用人工连缀起来，疏忽的看去，也未尝不像是诗。故作玄奥渊博、颠倒意象，堆砌起重重礼遇的诗。
A good poem in front of an understanding reader can sometimes be a miracle. However, the sad and smooth, extravagant images and painted emotions are connected by artificial means, and if you look at it casually, it might not look like poetry. Pretending to be profound and profound, the poem reverses the images and piles up many metaphors.
也可以赫然惊人一下。一个比喻或一种象征，在字面或事物上可以极简单，而同时可以带着字面事物以外的声音、颜色、形状，引起它们与其他事关系的联想。
It can also be shocking. A metaphor or a symbol can be extremely simple in terms of literal words or things, and at the same time, it can carry sounds, colors, and shapes other than literal things, causing associations with their relationships with other things.
这个办法可以多方面的来辅助每句话确实的含义，而又加增观感、情感、理智每方面的刺激和满足，道理甚为明显。写诗究竟是怎么一回事，真是唯有天知道的最清楚。读者与作者，读者与读者。
This method can assist in many ways to understand the true meaning of each sentence, and also increase the stimulation and satisfaction of every aspect of the senses, emotions, and intelligence. The reason is very obvious. What writing poetry is all about, really only God knows best. Readers and writers, readers and readers.
作者与作者关于诗的意见，历史告诉我，传统的是要永远的差别分歧，争吵到无尽时。因为老实的说，谁也仍然不知道写诗是怎么一回事的，除却这篇文字所表示的勉强以抽象的许多名词。
History tells me that the opinions of authors about poetry are always divided and quarreled to no end. Because to be honest, no one still knows what writing poetry is about, except for what is expressed in this text, which is barely expressed by many abstract nouns.
具体的一些比喻来琢磨描写那一种特殊的直觉活动，现出一个极不能令人满意的答案。彼此，朋友又见面了，点点头笑笑，彼此晓得这一年不比往年，彼此是同增了许多经验。个别的说，
Some specific metaphors are used to describe that special kind of intuitive activity, providing an extremely unsatisfactory answer. Each other. The friends met again, nodding and smiling. They knew that this year was no different from previous years, and that both of them had gained a lot of experience. Individually.
这世间中每一人的经历虽都有特殊的形香，含着特殊的滋味，需要个别的情绪来分析来描述。综合的说，这许多经验却是一整片仿佛同是同色、同大小、同分量的迷惘。你触着那一角。
Although everyone's experience during this time has a special shape and taste, it requires individual emotions to analyze and describe. Taken together, although everyone's experience during this time has a special shape and taste, it requires individual emotions to analyze and describe. Taken together, these many experiences are a whole confusion that seems to be of the same style, color, size, and weight. You touch that corner.
我碰上这一头，归根还是那一片迷惘笼罩着彼此。那陌生的城市在地图上指出时，你所经过的同他所经过的也可以有极大的距离，你同他当时的情形也可以完全的不相同。但是在这里，
When I met this person, the confusion still shrouded each other. When a strange city is pointed out on a map, there may be a huge distance between what you are passing through and what he is passing through, and the situation between you and him at that time may be completely different. But here,
个别的异同似乎非常之不相干，相干的仅是你我会彼此点头，彼此会意，于是也会彼此的笑笑。那一晚在某江心某一来船的甲板上，热臭的人丛中，他记起他那时的困顿饥渴和狼狈。
individual similarities and differences seem very irrelevant. All that matters is that you and I nod to each other, understand each other, and therefore smile at each other. That night in the middle of a certain river, on the deck of an incoming ship, among the hot and smelly crowds, he remembered how trapped, hungry, and embarrassed he felt at that time.
旋绕他头上的却是那真实到如同幻象，幻象又成了真实的狂敌杀人的工具，敏捷而近代型的飞机，美丽的像鱼像鸟，这里黯然的一居笑是必须的。
What was swirling around his head was that reality but seemed to be an illusion, and the illusion became the murderous tool of the real mad enemy, an agile and modern aircraft, as beautiful as a fish or a bird. A sad smile is necessary here.
因为同样的另外一个人懂得那原始的骤然唤起纯金肉反射作用的恐怖。这话或许可以在许多心弦上扣起回响，我常思索这简单朴实的情感是从哪里来的。信念像一道泉流透过意识。
For the same other person knows the horror of the primitive sudden arousal of pure muscular reflexes. These words may resonate with many heartstrings. I often think about where this simple emotion comes from. Belief? Like a stream flowing through consciousness.
我开始明了，理智同热血的冲动以外，还有个纯真的力量的出处。信心产生力量，又可储蓄力量。这种时候，叹息是悬起了，因一切虽然细小，却绝非从前所熟识的感伤。每件经验都有它粗壮的真实。
I began to understand that besides reason and passionate impulse, there was also a source of pure strength. Confidence generates strength and also saves strength. At this time, I sighed, because although everything was small, it was definitely not the sentimentality I was familiar with before. I began to understand that besides reason and passionate impulse, there was also a source of pure strength. Confidence generates strength and also saves strength. At this time, I sighed, because although everything was small, it was definitely not the sentimentality I was familiar with before. Every experience has its own solid truth.
没有叹息的余地。经过炮火或流浪的洗礼，变幻又变幻的日月，难道彼此脸上没有一点记载这经验的痕迹？但是当整一片国土纵横着疮痕，大家都是离散而相失，去故乡而救远，自然。
There is no room for sighs. After being baptized by artillery fire or wandering, the sun and moon change again and again. Is there no trace of this experience on each other's faces? There is no room for sighs. After being baptized by artillery fire or wandering, the sun and moon change again and again. Is there no trace of this experience on each other's faces? But when the entire land is riddled with scars, and everyone is separated and lost, when you go to your hometown, you are far away, naturally.
心缠缘而伤怀兮，渺不知其所值。脸上所刻那几道，并不使彼此惊讶，所以还只是笑笑好。现在后方被缓的生活，紧的情感，两面摩擦的愁郁无快，举凄凄而不可解。每个人都可以苦恼而又热情地唱。
My heart is beautiful, but I am sad, and I don't know where it is. The words engraved on the faces did not surprise each other, so they just smiled. Now the life behind is slowed down, the emotions are tense, and the two sides the friction makes me depressed and unhappy, and I live in a state of incomprehension. My heart is beautiful, but I am sad, and I don't know where it is. The words engraved on the faces did not surprise each other, so they just smiled. Now the life behind is slowed down, the emotions are tense, and the two sides the friction makes me depressed and unhappy, and I live in a state of incomprehension.
终长夜之漫漫兮，言此哀而不去，或宁客死而流亡兮，不忍为此之长愁。支持这日子的主力在哪里呢？你我生死就不检讨它的意义自大，也还需要一点结实的凭借才好。现在后方的问题。
The long night is so full of people that I hide my sorrow and never go away. Or, I would rather die and be in exile. I can't bear to be worried about this all the time. Where is the main force supporting this day? You and I will live and die without examining its meaning in order to be arrogant. We also need some solid support. Now the problem at the rear.
是这种力量的源泉在哪里？绝不凭着平日均衡的理智，那是不够的，天知道。尤其是在这时候，情感就在皮肤底下踊跃其若汤，似乎他所需要的是超理智的冲动。此时我是下颚汗。
Where is the source of this power? Never rely on your usual balanced reason. That's not enough, God knows. Especially at this time, emotions are buoyant under the skin, as if what it needs is a super-rational impulse. At this time I wiped the sweat from my forehead.
差不多可以意识到自己口边的纹路，我尊重着那酸甜的笑，因为我明白起来，它是力量。我认得有个人，很寻常的过着国难日子的寻常人，写信给他朋友说，他的嗓子虽然总是那么干哑。
I am almost aware of the lines around my mouth, and I respect that sweet and sour smile, because I understand that it is power. I know a person, an ordinary person living a very ordinary life during the national crisis, wrote to his friend and said that although his voice was always so dry and hoarse,
他却要哑着嗓子私下告诉他的朋友，他感到无论如何在这时候，他为这可爱的老国家带着血活着，或流着血，或不流着血死去，他都觉到荣耀异于寻常的。他现在对于生与死都必然感到满足。
But he had to tell his friends privately with a hoarse voice. He felt that no matter at this time, he lived with blood for this lovely old country, or died with blood or without blood, he felt glorious and strange. Ordinarily, he must now be satisfied with both. But he had to tell his friends privately with a hoarse voice. He felt that no matter at this time, he lived with blood for this lovely old country, or died with blood or without blood, he felt glorious and strange. Ordinarily, he must now be satisfied with both life and death.
我们在这生是如此艰难，死是这样容易的时候，彼此仍会微笑点头的缘故，也就在这里吧。现在生活既这样的彼此患难同慰，这信心自是我们此时最主要的联系。
When life is so difficult and death is so easy, this is why we still smile and nod, right? Now that we share the same hardships in life, this faith is our most important connection at this time.
不信你问他为什么仍这样硬朗地活着，他的回答自然也是你的回答。如果他也问你，想来彼此都不会记得过分清晰，一切都似乎在迷离中旋转，但谁又会忘掉那么切肤的重重忧患的网膜？
If you don't believe me, if you ask him why he is still alive like this, his answer will naturally be your answer, too, if he asks you to. Thinking about it, neither of them remembers it too clearly, everything seems to be spinning in a blur, but who can forget the omentum, which is so close to the skin and full of worries?
思索时许多事，在思流的过程中总是那么晦涩，明了时自己都好笑，所想到的是那么简单明显的事实。如果你有志不让生活在小处屡败，逐渐减损，由锐而钝，由张而弛。
When thinking about many things, they are always so obscure in the process of thinking. When I understand them, it makes me laugh. What I think of is such a simple and obvious fact. If you are determined to live your life, you will not let it fail in small areas, gradually weakening, from sharp to dull, from tension to relaxation.
你就得更感谢那许多极平常而琐碎的摩擦，无日无夜地透过你的神经、肌肉或意识。在后方，事情却没有如此简单，生活仍然缓迟地伸缩着，时速生死间距离恰像黄昏长影，长长地尽向前引申。
You are even more grateful for the many ordinary and trivial frictions that pass through your nerves, muscles, or consciousness day and night. In the rear, things are not so simple. Life is still expanding and contracting slowly. The distance between food, accommodation, life and death is like a long shadow at dusk, long and stretching forward.
像要扑入夜色，同夜融成一片模糊。在日夜宽泛的巡回里，于是穿插反更多了，真是天地无穷，人生长情。生之穿插凌乱而琐屑，完全无特殊的色泽或轮廓，更不必说英雄气息、壮烈成分。
It's like plunging into the night, and the same night dissolves into a blur. In the broad cycle of day and night, there are more intersperses. It is really that the world is endless and life is long and diligent. The interweaving of life is messy and trivial, with no special color or outline at all, let alone heroic elements.
斑斑点点，仅像小穴秀凝，在生活上，在你最不经意中烙印生活。在前线的前线，兴奋和疲劳已参半着尘土和血淋成一种生活的形体魂魄。睡与醒中间，饥与食中间，生和死中间。
The spots are just like small blood rust condensing on life, marking life when you least expect it. On the front line, excitement and fatigue have been mixed with dust and blood to form the body and soul of another life. Between sleeping and waking, between hunger and eating, between life and death.
距离短的几乎不存在，生活只是一股力，死亡一片沉默的恨，事情简单的无可再简单。尚在生存着的，继续着势力；死去的也继续着堆积成更大的恨。 恨又生利，利又变恨，往往的却勇敢地循环着。
The distance is almost non-existent. Life is just a force, death is a silent hatred, and things couldn't be simpler. Those who are still alive continue to be powerful, and those who are dead continue to accumulate into greater hatred. The distance is almost non-existent. Life is just a force, death is a silent hatred, and things couldn't be simpler. Those who are still alive continue to be powerful, and those who are dead continue to accumulate into greater hatred.
其他一切则全是悬在这两者中间悲壮热烈的穿插。口边那酸甜的纹路是实际哀乐所刻画而成，是一种坚韧任性的笑。因为生活既不是简单的火焰石，它本身是很沉重，需要韧性的支持。
Everything else is suspended tragically and passionately between these two. The sweet and sour lines on the edge of the mouth are carved by actual sorrow and joy, and are a kind of perseverance and resilience. Because life is neither a simple flame, it itself is very heavy and needs to be supported with resilience.
需要产生这韧性支持的力量。口角边长添几道酸甜的纹路，可以帮助彼此咀嚼生活。何不默认这一点，在迷惘中人最应该有笑。这种的笑，虽然是敛住神经、敛住肌肉，仅是毅力的后背。
The power to generate this resilient support is needed. A few sweet and sour lines are often added to the corners of the mouth to help each other chew their lives. Why not acquiesce to this point? When people are confused, they should laugh most. This kind of laughter, although it restrains nerves and muscles, is only the backbone of perseverance.
它却是必须的，如同保护色对于许多生物是必须的一样。再说，出入一个陌生城市的一天，这经验现在又多普遍，尤其是在夜间，这里就把个别的情形和感触除外。
It is necessary, just like protective color is necessary for many living things. Let's talk about the first day in a strange city. This experience is so common now, especially at night, except for individual situations and feelings.
在大家心底曾留下的，还不是一剂彼此都熟识的清凉散。苦里带涩，那滋味侵入脾胃时，小小的冷劲会轻轻在背脊上爬过，用不着丝毫锐性的感伤。信仰坐在我们中间多少时候了？
Isn't it a refreshing powder that everyone is familiar with that has been left in everyone's heart? Bitter and astringent, when the taste invades the spleen and stomach, a small chill will gently crawl across the back, without any sharp sentimentality. How long has faith been sitting among us?
那理智热情都不能代替的信心。信仰坐在我们中间多少时候了？你我可曾觉察到？信仰所给予我们的力量，不也正是那坚忍韧性的倔强？我们都相信，我们只要都为他忠贞的活着或死去。
That confidence that cannot be replaced by reason or passion. How long has faith been sitting among us? Have you and I ever noticed it? Isn't the strength that faith gives us the same kind of perseverance and tenacity? We all believe that as long as we live or die faithfully for it.
我们的大国家自会永远地向前迈进，由一个时代到又一个时代。他也正在想那时，他在某车站台上露宿，天上有月，左右有人，零落如同被风雨吹落后的落叶，瑟索地蜷伏着。
Our great country will move forward forever, from one era to another. He was also thinking about that time when he was sleeping in the open on a certain station platform. There was a moon in the sky, and there were people on the left and right. Our great country will move forward forever, from one era to another. He was also thinking about that time when he was sleeping in the open on a certain station platform. There was a moon in the sky, and there were people on the left and right. They were scattered like fallen leaves after being torn down by the wind and rain, curled up.
他们心里都在回味那一天他们所初次尝到的敌机的轰炸。谈话就可以这样无限制的延长，因为现在都这样的记忆，比这样更辛辣苦楚的，在个人心里真是太多了。
They were all recalling the bombing by enemy planes that they had experienced for the first time that day. The conversation can be extended indefinitely, because now there are too many memories like this, more painful and painful than this, in everyone's heart.
随便提起一个地名，大家所熟悉的都会或商埠，随着全会涌起怎样的一个最后印象？也许他可以说，他在那夜进入某某城内时，看到一列小店门前漆黄的灯，黄黄地发出奇异的晕光。
Just mention a city or commercial port that everyone is familiar with, and what kind of final impression will come up with the plenum? Maybe he could say that when he entered such and such a city that night, he saw a row of sad lights in front of small shops, emitting a strange yellow halo.
使他嗓子里如梗着刺，感到一种发紧的触觉。你所记得的却是某一号车站后面暗白的煤气灯射到陌生的街心里，使你心里好像失落了什么。7月，这两字就如同诗歌的开头那么有劲。8月。
It made him feel a tingling sensation in his throat. What you remember is that the dim gas lamp behind a certain station shines into the unfamiliar street, making you feel like you are missing something. July. These two words are as powerful as the beginning of a historical song, August.
9月带来了那狂风，后来过了年，那无法忘记的除夕，又是那1月、2月、 3月到了7月，再接再厉的又到了年夜。现在又是1月2月再开始，谁记得最清楚这串日子是怎样的延续下来？
September brought that wild wind, later. Then came the new year, that unforgettable New Year's Eve. It's January, February, March, July, and New Year's Eve again. Now January and February are beginning again. Who remembers best how this string of days continues?
生活如何地变？7月在卢沟桥与敌人开火以后，纵横中国土地上的脚印秘密地衔接起来，更加增了中国地域广袤的证据。每个人参加过这广袤地面上流转的大韵律的对于尘土和血。
How has life changed? After the enemy opened fire at Lugo Bridge in July, the footprints across China's land were closely connected, adding to the evidence of China's vast territory. Everyone who has participated in the great rhythm flowing on this vast ground is concerned about dust and blood.
两件在寻常不多为人所理会的极寻常的天然质素，现在每人在他个别的脚上对他们都发生了莫大亲切的认识。每一寸土，每一滴血，这种话已是可接触、可把持的十分真实的事物。
Two very ordinary natural qualities that few people usually pay attention to, but now everyone in his own corner has a very intimate understanding of them. Every inch of soil, every drop of blood, these words are very real things that can be touched and controlled.
不仅是一句话、一个概念而已，话不用再说了。现在一切都是这么彼此，这么共同，个别的情绪这么不相干。当前的艰苦不是个别的，而是普遍的，充满整一个民族、整一个时代。
It's not just a sentence or a concept. Needless to say, everything is so interconnected now, so common, and individual emotions are so irrelevant. The current hardships are not individual, but universal, filling an entire nation and an entire era.
我们今天所叫做生活的，过后它便是历史。客观的无疑，我们彼此所熟识的艰苦正在展开一个大时代，所以别忽略了我们现在彼此地点点头，且最好让我们共同酸甜的笑纹，有力的、坚韧的。
What we call life today will be history later. Objectively, there is no doubt that the hardships we are familiar with are unfolding in a big era. So don't miss the fact that we are nodding to each other now. And it is best for us to share the sweet and sour smile lines, powerfully and tenaciously.
横过历史，一片阳光。放了假，春初的日子松弛下来，将午未午时后的阳光橙黄的一片，由窗棂横进到室内，经营地四处射。我有点发怔，习惯地在沉寂中惊讶我的周围。
Across history. A piece of sunshine. After the holiday, the days in early spring are relaxing. The bright yellow sunlight at mid-afternoon penetrates horizontally through the window lattice into the room, shining brightly in all directions. I was a little dazed, and I was used to being surprised by the silence around me.
我望着太阳那湛明的体质，像要辨别它那交织绚烂的色泽，追逐它那不着痕迹的流动。看它洁净地映到书桌上时，我感到桌面上平铺着一种恬静，一种精神上的豪兴，情趣上的闲逸，即或所谓。
I look at the sun's bright physique, as if to distinguish its intertwined and gorgeous colors, and to chase its traceless flow. When I saw it reflected cleanly on the desk, I felt that there was a kind of tranquility, a kind of spiritual exhilaration, and a sense of leisure spread on the desk, that is, the so-called.
窗明几净，那里默守着神秘的期待，漾开诗的气氛。那里并没有几案花香，美术的布置，只是一张极寻常的八仙桌。如果我的记忆没有错，那上面在不多时间以前是刚陈列过咸鱼。
The window is bright and clean. There is a mysterious expectation silently kept there, and the atmosphere of poetry is blooming. There is no flower fragrance there, and the art decoration is just a very ordinary eight immortals table. The window is bright and clean. There is a mysterious expectation silently kept there, and the atmosphere of poetry is blooming. There is no flower fragrance there, and the art decoration is just a very ordinary eight immortals table. If my memory is correct, there is nothing on it. A long time ago, there was a display of salted fish and
酱菜一类极寻常简朴的午餐的，小孩子的心却呆了。或许两只眼睛倒张大一点，四处的望，似乎在寻觅一个问题的答案：为什么那片阳光美得那样动人？那种静。
Pickles are a very common and simple lunch. The child's heart was stunned. Perhaps his eyes were a little wider, looking around, as if looking for the answer to a question. Why is that patch of sunshine so beautiful? That pickles are a very common and simple lunch. The child's heart was stunned. Perhaps his eyes were a little wider, looking around, as if looking for the answer to a question. Why is that patch of sunshine so beautiful? That kind of silence.
在镜里似可听到那一处称从的泉流，和着仿佛是断续的琴声，低诉着一个幽读者自娱的音调。那时大概刚是午后2点钟光景，一张刚开过饭的八仙桌，异常寂寞地立在当中。
In the silence, one can seem to hear the stream of the tsong-tsong in that place, together with the intermittent sound of the piano, whispering the tones of a lonely person amusing himself. It was probably just 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and an 8 immortals table, where dinner had just been served, stood in the middle of it very lonely.
桌下一片由厅口处射进来的阳光，谢谢融融地倒在那里。一个绝对敲击的周围伴着这一片无声的金色的晶莹，不知为什么，忽使我6岁孩子的心里起了一次极不平常的震荡。
Under the table, a piece of sunshine came in from the entrance of the hall, and fell there happily. An absolute silence surrounded by this silent golden crystal, for some reason, suddenly caused an extremely unusual oscillation in the heart of my 6-year-old child.
这里要说到我最初认识的一片阳光。那年我6岁，记得是刚刚出了水珠以后，水珠即寻常水痘，不过我家乡的话叫它做水珠。当时我很喜欢那美丽的名字，忘却它是一种病。
Here I want to talk about the piece of sunshine that I first met. I was 6 years old that year, and I remember that it was just after I developed water drops. Water drops are common chickenpox, but in my hometown the dialect calls it water drops. At that time, I liked that beautiful name so much that forgetting it was a disease. Here I want to talk about the piece of sunshine that I first met. I was 6 years old that year, and I remember that it was just after I developed water drops. Water drops are common chickenpox, but in my hometown the dialect calls it water drops. At that time, I liked that beautiful name so much that forgetting it was a disease.
因而也觉到一种神秘的骄傲。只要人过我窗口问问出水珠吗，我就感到一种荣耀，那个感觉至今还印在脑子里。也为这个缘故，我还记得病中奢侈的愉悦心境。这种说法怕有点会发生误会。
Therefore, I also feel a mysterious pride. As long as people pass by my window and ask if they can find water beads, I felt an honor. That feeling is still imprinted in my mind. For this reason, I still remember the luxurious and joyful state of mind during illness. Therefore, I also feel a mysterious pride. As long as people pass by my window and ask if they can find water beads, I felt an honor.
我并不说这片阳光射入室内需要笔砚花香那些儒雅的托衬才能动人，我的意思倒是室内顶寻常的一些供射，只要一片阳光这样又悠闲又洒脱地落在上面，一切都会带上另一种动人的气息。
I'm not saying that the sunshine that shines into the room requires the elegance of pens, inkstones, and the fragrance of flowers to make it moving. What I mean is that as long as a piece of sunshine falls on the ordinary ceiling furnishings like this, elegant and free, it will be moving. Everything will bring another moving atmosphere.
这样说来，谁该比弃自己感觉上的小小旅行，为壮壮自己胆子，我们更该相信，唯其人类有这类情绪的驰骋，实际的世间才更续着产生我们精神所寄托的文物精粹。
With that said, who should despise what feels like a little trip? In order to strengthen our courage, we should believe that only if human beings have this kind of emotional ride, the real world will continue to produce the essence of cultural relics on which our spirits are entrusted.
虽然同其他多次的害病一样，那次我仍然是孤独地被囚禁在一间房屋里休养的。那是我们老宅子里最后的一间房子，白粉墙围着小小院子，北面一排3间，当中夹着一个开敞的厅堂。
Although it was the same as other times when I got sick, I was still alone and imprisoned in a house to recuperate. It was the last house in our old house. It had a small courtyard surrounded by whitewashed walls. There were 3 rooms in a row on the north side, with an open hall sandwiched between them.
我病在东头娘的卧室里，西头是婶婶的住房。娘同婶永远要在祖母的前院里行使他们女人们的职务的，于是我尝试这3间房屋唯一留守的主人。看到这同一片阳光射到地上时，
I was sick in Dong Tu Nyan's bedroom. To the west is my aunt's house. My mother-in-law and aunt always had to perform their duties as women in my grandmother's front yard, so I was often the only remaining owner of these 3 houses. When I see the same patch of sunlight hitting the ground,
我感到地面上花影浮动，暗香吹拂左右，人随着晌午的光霭花气在变换，那种动柔谐婉转，有如无声音乐，令人悠然轻快，不自觉地脱落伤愁。至多在舒扬理智的客观里，使我偶一回头。
I feel the shadows of flowers floating on the ground, the faint fragrance blowing around, and the flowers changing with the light at noon. The movement, softness, and grace are like silent music, making people feel leisurely and lighthearted, and unconsciously letting go of sadness. At most, Xu Yang's rational objectivity made me look back once in a while.
看看过去幼年记忆步履所留的残迹，有点惋惜时间，微微怪世间不能保存情绪，保存那一切情绪所曾流连的境界。此刻我竟可以微微一咳嗽，乃至于用播音的圆润口调说。
Looking at the remnants left by the memories of childhood in the past, I feel a little regretful for time. Wei Wei wonders that time cannot preserve emotions and preserve the realm where all emotions once lingered. At this moment, I could cough slightly, and even say in a broadcasting tone.
我们既然无疑地珍惜文化，即尊重盘古到今种种的艺术，无论是抽象的思想的艺术，或是具体的驾驭天然材料另创的非天然形象，则对于艺术所由来的渊源，那点点人的感觉，人的情感智慧，
Since we undoubtedly cherish culture, that is, we respect all kinds of art from ancient times to the present, whether it is the art of abstract ideas, or the specific use of natural materials to create unnatural images, then we have a little bit of the origin of art. Human feelings, human emotional intelligence.
通称人的情绪又当如何的珍惜才算合理？此刻它仅是一种无踪迹的流动，并无栖身的形体。它或含有各种或可捉摸的质素，但是好奇地探讨这个质素，而具体要表现它的差事，无论其有无意义。
Commonly known as human emotions, how should we cherish it reasonably? At this moment it is just a traceless flow with no inhabited form. It may contain various qualities that may be elusive, but it is the job of curiously exploring this quality to express it concretely, whether it makes sense or not.
除却本人外，别人是无能为力的。我记得我爬到房内窗前的桌子上坐着，有意无意地望望窗外，院里粉墙疏影同室内那片金色和煦决然不同趣味。顺便我翻开手边量梳妆用的旧式镜箱。
Except for myself, no one else can do anything. I remember I climbed up to sit on the table in front of the window in the room and looked out the window intentionally or unintentionally. The sparse shadows on the white walls of the courtyard were completely different from the golden warmth indoors. By the way, I opened the old mirror box that my mother used for dressing up.
又上下摇动那小牌状抽屉，同那刻成花篮形小铜坠子，不时听雀跃过之清脆的鸟语，心里却仍为那片阳光引着一片模糊的疑问。我此刻为着一片清婉可喜的阳光。
Then he shook the small row of drawers and the small copper pendant carved into the shape of a flower basket up and down, and from time to time he listened to the clear chirping of birds jumping across the branches. But there is still a vague doubt in my heart about that piece of sunshine. I am looking forward to a piece of clear. Then he shook the small row of drawers and the small copper pendant carved into the shape of a flower basket up and down, and from time to time he listened to the clear chirping of birds jumping across the branches. But there is still a vague doubt in my heart about that piece of sunshine. I am looking forward to a piece of clear and pleasant sunshine at this moment.
分明自己在对内心交流变化的各种联想发生一种兴趣的注意，换句话说，这好奇与兴趣的注意已是我此刻生活的活动。一种力量又迫着我来把握住这个活动，而设法表现它，这不易抑制的冲动。
It is clear that I am paying interested attention to the various associations of inner exchanges and changes. In other words, this curiosity and interest in paying attention are already the activities of my life at this moment. A force forced me to grasp this activity and try to express it. This impulse was not easy to restrain.
或即所谓艺术冲动也未可知。我们怀疑，或许就是人身上那一撮精神同机体的感觉，生理心理所供起的情感，所激发出的一串行为，所聚敛的一点智慧，那么一点点人之所以为人的表现。
Or the so-called artistic impulse is unknown. We suspect that it may be a bunch of spiritual and physical feelings in a person, a series of behaviors inspired by physical and psychological emotions, a bit of wisdom gathered, a little bit of the expression of why a person is a human being.
情绪的旅行本，偶然的是，今天一开头并为着这片春初晌午的阳光，现在也还是为着它。房间内有2种毫尺的光场，叫我的心绪紧张，如同花开，趁着感觉的微风，深浅凌乱于冷炙的枝叶中间。
The journey of emotions is accidental. I was not for this piece of sunshine at noon in early spring today at the beginning, and I am still for it now. There are two kinds of luxurious light in the room that often make my mood tense, like flowers blooming. Taking advantage of the breeze of feeling, the depth and light are scattered among the cold branches and leaves.
一种是烛光，高高的台座，长垂的烛泪，熊熊红焰当帘幕四下时，各处光影掩映。那种闪烁明艳，雅有古意，明明是画中景象，却含有更多诗的成分。另一种便是这初春晌午的阳光。
One is candlelight, with a high pedestal, long-hanging candles, blazing red flames, and shadows everywhere when the curtains are drawn. It's sparkling, bright, elegant, and has an ancient meaning. It's obviously a scene in a painting, but it contains more poetic elements. One is candlelight, with a high pedestal, long-hanging candles, blazing red flames, and shadows everywhere when the curtains are drawn. It's sparkling, bright, elegant, and has an ancient meaning. It's obviously a scene in a painting, but it contains more poetic elements.
到时候有意无意的大片子洒落满室，那些窗棂栏板几案笔砚玉在光霭中，一时全成了静物图案。再有红蕊细枝点缀几处，室内更是清香浮溢，叫人俯仰，全触到一种灵性。
At that time, large pieces of paper, intentionally or unintentionally, were scattered all over the room. The window lattice and railings, the pens and inkstones were bathed in the light, and they all became a still life pattern for a while. There were also a few red stamen twigs embellished here and there, and the room was filled with light fragrance. It makes people look down and touch a kind of spirituality.
就说它是情绪上的小小旅行吧，不走并无不可。不过走走未始不是更好？归根说，我们活在这世上，到底最珍惜一些什么？果真珍惜万物之灵的人的活动所产生的种种所谓人类文化。
Let's just say it's a small emotional journey. It's okay not to go, but it's better to go without starting. Ultimately, what do we cherish most in this world? What is the so-called human culture if we really cherish the various activities of people who cherish the spirit of all things?
这人类文化到底又靠一些什么？宇宙万物客观的本无所可珍惜，反映在人性上的山川草木禽兽才开始有了秀丽，有了气质，有了灵犀。反映在人性上的人自己更不用说，没有人的感觉，人的情感。
What does human culture rely on? All things in the universe are objectively worthless. The mountains, rivers, vegetation, and animals reflected in human nature began to have beauty, temperament, and clarity. What does human culture rely on? All things in the universe are objectively worthless. The mountains, rivers, vegetation, and animals reflected in human nature began to have beauty, temperament, and clarity. Not to mention the people themselves who are reflected in their human nature. There are no human feelings, human emotions.
即便有自然，也就没有自然的美。智或神方面更无所谓人的智慧、人的创造、人的一切生活艺术的表现。在那3间屋子里并着，那经验是难堪的。时间过得特别慢，尤其是在日中毫无睡意的时候。
Even if there is nature, there is no natural beauty, and it does not matter in terms of quality or God, let alone human wisdom, human creation, and the expression of all human art of life. Being sick in those 3 rooms was an embarrassing experience. Time passes very slowly, especially in the middle of the day when there is no sleep at all.
起初，我紧急住我的听觉在各种似脚步又不似脚步的上面，猜想着，等候着，希望着人来。见或听听隔墙各种琐碎的声音由墙基底下传达出来，又消敛了去。过一会儿，我就不耐烦了，不记得是怎样的。
At first, I just focused my hearing on various sounds that looked like footsteps but didn't look like footsteps. Guessing, waiting, hoping for someone to come. Occasionally, I listened to various trivial sounds on the partition wall, which were conveyed from under the wall foundation and then disappeared. After a while, I got impatient. I don't remember how.
我就蹑着鞋，挨着木床走到房门边，房门向着厅堂斜斜地开着一扇，我便扶着门框，好奇地向外探望。只记得冷静地踱公步、散散步，看看花，也不免会有江上被花恼不彻，无处告诉指癫狂。
I tiptoed on my shoes and walked next to the wooden bed to the door. The door opened diagonally toward the hall, so I held the door frame and looked out curiously. I tiptoed on my shoes and walked next to the wooden bed to the door. The door opened diagonally toward the hall, so I held the door frame and looked out curiously. I just remember that the Kamdu Gongbu took a walk and looked at the flowers, and it was inevitable that the flowers on the river are so annoying that there is nowhere to tell but the madness.
的情绪上一片紊乱，玲珑煦暖的阳光照人面前，那美的感人力量就不减于花，不容我生硬的自己把情绪分化为有闲与实际的2种，而权其轻重，然后再决定取舍的。我也只有情绪上的一片紊乱。
Emotionally confused. The exquisite and warm sunshine shines in front of people, and the touching power of its beauty is no less than that of flowers. I don't allow myself to rigidly divide my emotions into leisure and reality, and then decide the choice based on their severity. I was just emotionally confused.
倚在软椅上不但奢侈，也许更是一种过失，有闲的过失。但东坡的辩护，懒者常似镜，镜其懒者图，不是没有道理。如果此刻不以踏上而进，则方才情绪所兜的小小圈子便无条件地失落了去。
Leaning on a soft chair is not only a luxury, but perhaps a sin of leisure. But Dompa's defense, a lazy person always seems to be quiet, but stillness is not like a lazy person. It is not unreasonable. Leaning on a soft chair is not only a luxury, but perhaps a sin of leisure. But Dompa's defense, a lazy person always seems to be quiet, but stillness is not like a lazy person. It is not unreasonable.
人家就不可惜他，自己却实在不能不感到这种亲密的损失的可爱。但是情绪的驰骋，显然不是诗或画或任何其他艺术建造的完成。这驰骋此刻虽占了自己生活的若干时间。
Others feel pity for it, but they themselves cannot but feel the sadness of this loss of intimacy. But the galloping of emotions is obviously not the completion of poetry or painting or any other artistic construction. Although this galloping now takes up a certain amount of time in my life.
却并不在空间里占任何一个小小位置。这个情形自己需完全明了。时间经过20多年，直到今天，又是这样一泻阳光，一片不可捉摸、不可思议流动的而又恬静的瑰宝。
But it doesn't occupy any small position in the space. You need to fully understand this situation yourself. More than 20 years have passed, and until today, there is another burst of sunshine, an elusive, incredibly flowing and quiet treasure.
我才明白，我那问题是永远没有答案的。事实上仅是如此，一张孤独的桌，一角寂寞的厅堂。一只灵巧的静香，或窗外断续的鸟语和水珠，那美丽小孩子的病名。
I realized that there would never be an answer to my question. In fact, it is just that, a lonely table, a lonely corner of the hall. A clever mirror box, or the intermittent chirping of birds outside the window, and water drops, the name of the beautiful child's illness.
便凑巧永远同初春竟晨的阳光整整副斜斜的呈